Trump called people there on January 6th to protest the certification of the vote. He led everybody to believe that that certification could be stopped, either with Pence or with enough force applied, I guess. And as the insurrection was ongoing, Donald Trump was making calls to lawmakers to try to continue to encourage them to delay the certification of the vote. There was a plan in mind the entire time. It was even more extensive than that. But yeah, he was hoping that there'd be a lot of pressure. That's why he called people there on January 6th. That's why he, even when he knew they had guns and stuff, he sent them to the Capitol to go and protest. It's why he said over and over again, stop the steal, fight like hell to take our country back. And it's why when violence started and he watched violence happening on TV and he heard that Ashley Babbitt had been shot, instead of like trying to call people off from being violent, he tried to take advantage of the violence in order to further his scheme of having the vote not certified.
Destiny, good to see you, bro. I'm glad that you're still here with us, man.
I am still barely alive, but I'm still here, yeah?
Oh, man, dude. Going crazy on Twitter, man. It's crazy.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, man.
Are you sick? Are you okay?
Yeah, I've had to. I went to the RNC and I just came down with a bug ever since. I sound like all fucking congested and shit.
It's a lot better now, though.
Yeah, it's way better than before. It was worse than this. I went ahead and commingled with all the people you hate. They made me sick. Destiny.
Nice. Well, that's what happens because they were all unvaxxed, you know?
Oh, my.
Oh, man.
Well, if he was at the RNC, then they probably were all vaxxed, actually.
Yeah, depending on how far you go. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
All right, so guys, we'll start at the stream and I'll say, what's up, guys? I'll do a quick little, you know what, man? Honestly, bro, we don't even got to play the intro music or anything like that. We'll just go live and then I'll, you know what I'm saying, do a quick little intro and then I'll kind of make some quick announcements. Then, oh, my camera? Yeah. Just keep it on camera too for me. And then we'll be good. That's good. Shout out to Destiny and Andrew Wilson's audience. You guys are seeing like the behind the scenes of how we get ready before a show.
Well, I appreciate you moderating at such short notice. It's very kind of you to do.
Bro, of course, man. You guys are both the homie of both you guys, so it's totally cool. Don't mind it at all.
And I see some familiar names in this chat, too.
Yeah?
They know who they is.
Yeah. So.
All right, I'm gonna start up the live.
You're gonna start up the live now? All right, cool. So I won't even do my intro, guys. Like normally with the music and all that shit, I'm just gonna say, what's up, guys? Welcome to Fresh Fit Podcast. I'm here with Destiny and Andrew Wilson. Boom. We'll do some quick announcements, and then I'll just turn. Oh, who wants to go first? Andrew or Destiny?
I'll open first if Destiny has no problem with that.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair because I was the challenger.
All right. Destiny's okay with that. So what I'll do is I'll also give you guys like a 30-second warning. So you guys kind of know, hey, try to wrap it up if you can.
Okay.
And I'll time each round. So the first one, the 5 minutes, the opening statement will be 5 minutes.
Waiting on the confirmation.
Just waiting on the confirmations? Okay.
You got my friend Big Mo in studio or what?
Yeah, he's here.
Tell him I said what's up.
Because they knew what we were doing, so like, nah, we don't want to fuck this one up, so we're both going to come down.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Refreshing, making sure I get confirmation.
Yeah. We started the stream. We're just waiting for it to like pop up on all the different platforms.
Sure.
I think we're live up on YouTube now.
I see YouTube.
YouTube's up? Okay. And then once we're go on all of them, I'll make the intro. Welcome, guys. Roll in when you guys can.
Waiting on locals in Rumble.
Okay.
Oh, I think I see locals. Right when I said that. That means Rumble should be. All right.
We're live? Yes, on all of them? Yes, we are. Okay. All right, guys. What's up? Welcome to the front. Oh.
Let's do the beach one.
Gotta get 3,
go ahead.
2, 1.
All right, and we are live. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fresh Air Podcast, man. I'm joined by two people that I call my buddies, good guys, contrary to what people might say. Andrew Wilson and Destiny. Today I'm gonna be hosting a debate between them on was January 6th an insurrection? Okay, the way this debate is going to go is we're going to have opening statements by both parties for 5 minutes, where they're going to, identify their arguments, their stance, who they are, introduce themselves to you, etc. That's going to be 5 minutes uninterrupted. Then we're going to have 3 minutes where each of them are going to be able to lodge their arguments for 3 rounds of that for 3 minutes, going back and forth. And then we're going to have 2 rounds where it's an open 5-minute dialogue. I'll be timing each round, staying as a neutral moderator. So guys, if you're not familiar with Destiny or Andrew Wilson, please go subscribe to both their channels. I'm cool with both these guys. Obviously we don't agree on everything, but I respect both these guys as skilled debaters, and they're good colleagues of mine. So please go check out their channels on YouTube and on Rumble and all the platforms that they're on. The Omni Liberal on Twitter, the Paleo Christ. Was it the Paleo Christ Con on
just Paleo Christ Con, yeah.
Yeah, on X. So go check them out on all the platforms, guys. I'm happy to be able to host this debate. So other than that, we're live on all platforms, YouTube, Rumble, etc. Check us out on rumble.com/freshofit. And Andrew, I will turn it to you to go ahead and start with opening statements, and I'll start the timer.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you to the entire Fresh and Fit audience for coming out, and to DGG as well. We're here today to debate if the events of the January 6th Capitol riots were an insurrection or if they weren't. Simple. It's a simple debate prompt. They either were or they weren't. Looking into the idea of insurrection itself, it isn't exactly clear what the meaning of it is. It does always seem to be tied together with violence or some will to overthrow a government, law, government system, government itself, or resistance to that law, or something akin to this. The Supreme Court hasn't given us any guidance on this as they wash their hands of it, and to date, not a single person has been charged or convicted of insurrection who participated in any of the J6 rioting. This includes Donald Trump himself, who was acquitted of inciting insurrection. You would think, with no clear guidance of what an insurrection is, a lack of anybody being prosecuted for this supposed insurrection who participated, and a president acquitted of inciting one, that would be that. The events of January 6th were a protest that turned into a riot. This is nothing new. Democrats do it all the time. In fact, Destiny in 2021 completely agreed with my current assessment. Please, if you don't mind, play clip 1.
Okay, we will make that available to you. Bills is going to roll it up right now. And I will go ahead and give you an extra 5 seconds just on your thing, just because. Okay, go ahead. Play the video, please. Bills?
If you think the majority of the people there were actually trying to do that, and all they managed to do was kill one woman got shot by the cops, you're fucking delusional. I think most of the people probably showed up to protest because they were fucking mad, and then shit got riled up. There were probably, almost for sure, I would say, some genuine bad actors there that had fantasies of invading the fucking Capitol and shit. Now, I think I heard from the FBI that it was 5% or less had some plan to do something. Even that number sounds a little bit high, because 5% of however many thousand people, there's a lot of people. But I don't think every single person who went there, their goal was to destroy the White House or destroy the Capitol building and take it over. But because if they were, we would have saw way more shit.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, I have no visual on my end when those play, and I'd appreciate it if you guys could put the visual up on my end as well.
Okay.
In fact, Destiny even agrees such rioting and political violence is part of the democratic process, akin to voting, he says. He said this to justify the George Floyd or BLM riots, that such riots were just one side of the Democrat coin and baked in to our Democrat process. The tail's in, and just the other half of democracy, he says. Of course, he later denied this. Please play clip 2.
Okay. And we'll get this so that you can see it. Just 1 second. I'm going to stop the clock while we're right now, we're 2 minutes and 40 seconds in. Oh, hold on, Bills. I'm going to start the clock back up once, to be fair here, once the clip is up. Can you see it, Andrew?
I cannot see the clip, no, on my end.
He's going to make it visible to you here in a second.
Great.
And I stopped the clock just so everybody knows. Bear with us, guys. We're using a million different things, OBS, Zoom, all this other stuff. Shout out to Bills in the back, working hard. Can you see it now?
I can see something. There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So we will roll the clip now. I'm going to start the clock back up. Bills, go ahead.
Disingenuous sack of shit. Because, as I've debated you in the past, you started talking before January 6th ever occurred about how the BLM riots were justified. It was just the other side of the coin of voting. Of course, once you realized that grip wouldn't do as well for you when you were debating the Rittenhouse shit, You completely 180'd your position. All this
Did I ever, hold on, did I ever say writing is the other side of the coin to voting?
Probably did.
That's a really strange statement if I did. If I did, that's a really strange statement. But go ahead, okay.
Try to find a clip for it.
Activism and riots are one side of the coin and the other side is voting. There's conspiratorial at all. I think that affecting political change like this is fine. Like that's part of the goal. Like activism and riots are one side of the coin and the other side is voting.
Whoa.
And
So
this in 20 seconds in. Go ahead.
So why the radical change of heart on this topic from Destiny? This complete 180? Well, that's simple. He hates Donald Trump. A simple motivation, but at least understandable. He also hates Trump supporters. In order for him to justify that he wants them all to be unalived, he needs to brand them all as traitors and insurrectionists. In this way, he can build a case that Trump supporters are evil, and so it is justified to use violence against them. To recap that, Trump supporters are evil, therefore anything which happens to them is fine. Going so far as to say his friend Pisco, the only reason he wouldn't have liked Trump to have been unalived by this would-be assassin is because it would motivate Republicans. This, of course, gives us an entailment that if it wouldn't motivate Trump supporters, he would be fine with Trump having met his demise in this assassination attempt. And this is the last clip. Play clip 3, please, and then I'll wrap this up.
Okay, we're 4 minutes and 20 seconds in. I'm going to stop the watch while we pull this up. Approximately 4:24 seconds, but I'm adding another 5 from the first clip and how we were pulling it up. So
Far beyond that. So far.
okay, I'll start the clock back up once we roll the clip. Can you see it, guys? Can you see it, Andrew? Oh, sorry, he's screen sharing it right now. Give us 1 second. We'll pull it up. Thank you, audience, and thank you guys for bearing with us here. Many things going on. We want to make sure that Andrew can see it as well as the audience.
Yep, I can see it.
You can see it? Okay. Bills, go ahead. I'll start the timer back up.
So far beyond that. So far giving a fuck beyond any of these fucking losers. But go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Can I ask you a question? So, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Do you wish the attempt had been successful?
Do I wish that the attempt had been successful? Am I even allowed to say anything about that?
You don't have to answer that.
Here's what I'll say. This is what I will say. I don't know, because I'm trying to Fed post or whatever. Here's what I will say. A failed attempt is probably the worst outcome of anything that could have happened. I'll say that much.
I disagree. I think a successful attempt, if that had happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, hold on. We might agree. The successful attempt.
Stop real quick, Bills.
It would be an attempt at that point. The successful.
Pause real quick. So, guys, we just hit pretty much the 5-minute mark. Destiny, if you're okay with it, I can let this kind of go on another minute or so, and I'll afford you an extra minute and give you 6.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can learn about this thing out. Yeah.
You sure? Okay. All right. So we'll complete this out. I'll time it. Whatever I gave Andrew, I will give to you as well on your opening statements if you're okay with that. Go ahead, Bills. Roll the clip back. Thank you, Destiny.
Whatever might be the worst thing that happened, but if it was the worst thing, it would just because of like the country's reaction afterwards, basically, which is possible. Yeah.
Well, I mean.
So, ultimately, Destiny needs to be able to provide us with what an insurrection actually is, an actual working legal definition, or even a personal one, so we can work off of that to understand the mindset of a person who claims this was an insurrection, even as nobody ultimately is prosecuted for an insurrection. He, to date, hasn't done this for the same reason the Supreme Court and higher courts won't. If they do define it strictly and categorize it strictly, then it's likely Democrats and even Republicans are engaging in them all the time. Nonstop, in fact. I am, in fact, willing to, in the ultimate spirit of good faith, concede that if Destiny just can't really define an insurrection or tell us what goes into that category and not into the category of a riot, that he really has no business calling anybody an insurrectionist, especially when nobody's been charged with an insurrection in regards to J6. Nobody, and certainly not convicted. I will concede, however, if he concedes Democrats are likely involved in insurrections all the time, using violence for political change, I'll concede Republicans may be as well if his definition is that broad. However, that will eliminate his moral high ground for the justification of do what you want to them because they're traitors. That would also make you a traitor. With that, I'll cede my time. Note in that video that the entire audience, when he was asked this question by Pisco, said, yes, we would have preferred that Trump was unalive during that assassination attempt. Go ahead.
Okay. So that I have approximately 6 minutes and 45 seconds there. Destiny, I will reset the clock and allot you the same exact amount of time to stay fair here. Let me know when you are ready, and I'll restart the clock.
Yeah, I'm ready whenever.
Ready? Okay, I'm going to start it now. I'll give you 6:45 and go ahead, brother.
All right. I believe that the subject matter of the debate is whether or not January 6th is an insurrection or would be considered an insurrection. Originally, I thought there was going to be a 1v1 debate against me and Andrew, but I can do a 1v2 debate against my 2021 less educated self as well. I have no problem speaking to arguments I've made in prior clips. I have no problem speaking to current arguments made by Andrew. So we can head down that road. I think that the first thing that we need to acknowledge when we talk about the structure of the United States government is that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is what powers our three branches of government, and it sits above every other part of our government, and every part of our government must comport to the Constitution. I think this is a foundational American belief and principle, and if you don't share on this foundational belief, then we're never going to connect in any sort of meaningful way when we talk about how U.S. law or U.S. process or procedure, whatever, should be carried out. So that being said, there was an amendment to the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, and Section 3 of that amendment basically goes on to say that any prior oath taker that has engaged in or aided in an insurrection is no longer allowed to hold office, essentially. Now, the question that we come to today is trying to define what is an insurrection. And while in modern times, it seems like an insurrection is a term left to a dictionary or a term left to internet debaters, at the time that the amendment, the 14th Amendment, was framed, what was an insurrection was pretty well understood. An insurrection includes four vital elements. One is an assemblage, meaning a group of people that have come together. Two is resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Three is you have to do this by way of force or intimidation. And four is it has to be for a public concern or a public cause, not a private thing that one might be interested in. Just for some understandings of when we say an assemblage, we can look to in 1861, Justice Benjamin Curtis said a combination or conspiracy by which different individuals are united in one common purpose. So not just a bunch of people in a city protesting different things, but a group of people that are united in one common purpose. We can look to Justice Samuel Chase in the case of Fries in the year 1800. He says, if a body of people conspire and meditate an insurrection to resist or oppose the execution of any statute of the United States, a statute such as the ECA, the Electoral Count Act, which is what they were united on January 6th to insurrect against. They were opposing the execution of that. They are only guilty of a high misdemeanor, but if they proceed to carry such intention into execution by force, which we did see on the day of January 6th, regardless of if every member engaged in force or just one, they are guilty of the treason of levying war, and the quantum of force employed neither lessens nor increases the crime, whether by 100 or 1,000 persons is wholly immaterial. Doesn't matter if you have an insurrection of 50 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people. You only really need two people there to make it an insurrection. In terms of whether or not they were resisting a law or interfering with the cause of government, we can quote here, an insurrection against the United States requires resistance to any statute or some public law of the United States. This is a quote by Judge in, I think, 1826. Curtis spoke this to a jury. He says, the law does not distinguish between a purpose to prevent the execution of one or several or all laws. An insurrection could be directed at a legislature as well as at executive officials. William Rawle declared that an effort to coerce repeal of a general law to be an overt act of levying war. And Justice Field's opinion in the Great House Court case held that any effort to coerce the conduct of government constituted an insurrection, such as when people went to the went to the Capitol to coerce Pence to overthrow the election, which is what Donald Trump told them to do. By force or by intimidation, quoting Justice Marshall in 1807, the most comprehensive definition of levying war against the king or against the United States, which I have seen, requires an assemblage of men ready to act and with an intent to do some treasonable act and armed in warlike manner, or else assembled in such numbers as to supersede the necessity of arms. You don't necessarily need weapons to do it. You could just have the numbers of people there threatening to use force or intimidation. And then for a public purpose, obviously, the insurrection is to, I'm quoting Judge John Kane here, insurrections to redress by force national grievances or to reform real or imaginary evils of a public nature. Obviously, they were protesting the vote. That's what they were there to do. This is obviously a public issue. So to recount, For the assembly, there were hundreds of people that breached the Capitol building. There were thousands that trespassed on federal land. For 2, there was a clear resistance to the federal law. The trespassers were there to contravene the Electoral Count Act. There was a plethora of evidence brought up in the Anderson versus Griswold case about this, where quoting the judges on that case, they said substantial evidence in the record showed that the mob's unified purpose was to hinder or prevent Congress from counting the electoral votes as required by the 12th Amendment and from certifying the 2020 presidential election. The third element, the resistance made extensive use of force. This is self-evident just by watching any of the videos. To quote the Colorado Supreme Court again, the mob repeatedly and violently assaulted police officers who were trying to defend the Capitol. Obviously, there were calls to hang Mike Pence, and people marched, very famously, with 1776 signs, which, as many in this audience might be familiar with, was a very popular insurrection in U.S. history, or a rebellion even, one might say. And then for a public purpose, it was obviously for the public purpose of resisting what they perceived to be as the stealing of the election. There are ways to try to counter this argument. We can either use nonsense definitions of insurrection, but that doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters was the public understanding and the legal understanding of insurrection at the time the 14th Amendment was created and when Section 3 was framed, because that's what the Constitution demands, that we look at what was thought of as an insurrection when the language was added to the Constitution. We can try to divert by talking about BLM or anything else, and I'm happy to dive into all of those examples if we are going to concede on the original argument that January 6th satisfies all 4 elements of what I consider an insurrection to be. If we want to concede that and move on to analyzing any particular BLM action or whatever, that's totally fine. We can talk about the likeliness to work, of which an insurrection has never been defined as. An insurrection doesn't necessarily have to lead to the overthrow of a government. That would be understood as a rebellion. Every insurrection is not a rebellion, though every rebellion starts as an insurrection. And then when we say, this is a common one as well, why was no one charged with an insurrection? People can be charged or couldn't be charged with crimes for a variety of reasons, but for purposes of the 14th Amendment, nothing in there requires the criminal conviction of the crime of insurrection, only that an insurrection occurred and that one engaged in it or aided it.
All right. And that is 6:40. Okay. So just 5 seconds shy. That completes the opening statements. Really good arguments from both sides here. We'll go into round 1. I'll turn it back. So we just completed opening statements, guys. Each party had 6 minutes and 45 seconds to make their original stance and their first opening statements. We'll go to round 1. I'll set the clock for 3 minutes. Andrew, let me know when you are ready. And
I'm ready.
Okay, timer is going now. Go ahead. 3 minutes.
So let's start with this idea of my definition. What the hell do I care about your definition? Nobody has been prosecuted for any insurrection by any definition. Destiny comes through and he gives us this list. He says 1, an assemblage. Okay. 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Okay. 3, by force or intimidation. Okay. 4, for a public purpose. He has just outlined basically almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. That is what that is outlined. So let's see, an assemblage. This would cover a riot, a bunch of people assembling. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. That could be shutting down roadways for commerce. That could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this who are out there saying no justice, no peace, that would be very intimidating. And then for public purpose, very nebulous. All of this is completely nebulous language. He has not actually given us a definition at all. By the way, if you could cam me while I'm talking, I'd appreciate it. He has not given us a definition at all. He's just kind of given us this loose, nebulous framework for what is or isn't an insurrection. So let's kind of dive into a couple more things here. He says people can or can't be charged for a variety of reasons. That's not saying anything. So what? Yeah, that's true. Maybe they committed insurrection and they weren't charged for insurrection, but also maybe they did not commit insurrection and that's why they weren't charged with insurrection. That's a non-argument. He says that these elements, third element, self-evident, Colorado Supreme Court using 1776 signs. People use 1776 signs all the time and have absolutely no interest in any type of rebellion whatsoever. It's very common for people to have those as bumper stickers. That doesn't mean that they're going to be engaging in any kind of rebellion or insurrection at all. He also, as he talks about these various rulings, he says treason of levying war comes in. Obviously, insurrection seems to have something to do with levying war against the United States, or at least some type of start to levy war against the United States. He still has not actually demonstrated any of this. He's just given us this really nebulous idea. An assemblage resisting any law or interfering with a course of government proceeding by force or intimidating for public. This is very nebulous. So unless Destiny is going to concede that anything which meets this criteria is an insurrection, then I'm not even sure how to go forward with this debate. How in the world can he say essentially almost any riot on planet Earth or any assemblage, even a peaceful protest where they shut down the roads, is an insurrection? That can't be true. That just can't be true.
Okay. We had ended there at about 2:57. Andrew, you're up on our channel. They can see you. I don't know if it's on.
Yeah, we're good on mine too.
Oh, you are okay. Perfect. I just want to make sure that we're there. So, but you are definitely up on, and whoever's speaking, I always make them the main person. So, Destiny, I'm gonna put this is round one. I'm gonna put 3 minutes on the clock for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, brother.
So I think my definition is pretty clear. There is an assemblage. There's a clear resistance to the implementation or the execution of some federal law. The resistance has an aim to make use of force or intimidation, and it's gathered for a particular public purpose. BLM almost automatically fails on the fact that these were not usually demonstrations against federal law. I don't know the federal law or the federal thing that was being resisted by BLM. But again, I'm happy to dive into any particular BLM supposed insurrection or riot if you'd like. But again, I mean, that has nothing to do with January 6th. And if you want, then you can see that entire argument and we can move on to analyzing individual BLM instances. But again, you'd have to show that there was some implementation or carrying out of some federal function for it to be an insurrection against the United States government. States might have their own definitions of state insurrections. I'm unaware of any. So to say again, my definition of insurrection, like very clearly, has 4 elements. If you want to suggest an alternate definition that you feel more accurately comports with what you would consider an insurrection to be, that's fine. But we can't just say that it's nebulous and there is no definition when we have we've got references made in our Constitution and in our federal criminal code to insurrection. That doesn't make any sense. We can complain about people being charged with an insurrection or not, but whether or not somebody is charged with an insurrection, again, has nothing to do with the event itself. For instance, if I were to look and see at any number of BLM riots, if I were to look at a riot, would a challenge to that riot be, well, was anybody charged with rioting? If I could show you a riot where people clearly engaged in a riot, where there was a mass of people that were engaged in violent behavior that involved the destruction of some property or violent activity, but I were to say, well, look, nobody was actually charged with rioting, would you say then that, well, I guess nobody was actually, or there wasn't a riot that actually happened? Nobody would make that claim. There's a whole list of reasons why a prosecutor may or may not charge for particular crimes. In this particular case, there were really good reasons not to head down that insurrection charge road, because it would probably put the Supreme Court in a very hairy area, which they might end up getting into anyway, in terms of actually having a strict definition of what an insurrection is. But again, the 14th Amendment doesn't require a strict definition of insurrection in order to disbar somebody from running from office. All it needs is for a court to engage in asking the question of whether or not somebody had engaged in an insurrection, and if they had and were a prior oath taker, then they were barred from taking any public office in the future. So yeah, again, if there's an alternate definition that wants to be explored for an insurrection, then I welcome that. But that definition, it needs to comport with the historical and legal understanding of what an insurrection was. Otherwise, it's just meaningless, meandering. Opining that means nothing when we should be thinking, like, what was the definition of insurrection at the time the 14th Amendment was drafted?
Okay, that's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You don't want to use the rest of the 20 seconds, Destiny? Okay.
I mean, like, we can, if this ends up going into like a whole bunch of like BLM stuff, I mean, we can get to that, but that has no bearing on whether J6 would be considered an insurrection or not. So,
okay. So 2 minutes and 57 seconds. That completes round one. I will restart the clock. We'll move into round two. I'll turn it back to you, Andrew. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll turn the clock on.
So I'm not claiming that this has anything to do with BLM. I'm doing an internal critique and saying that if you're going to apply these nebulous standards to this, then you must apply them to this. If this category, if category A over here, also would include everything which includes a riot, then we would need to know what the delineating factor is. He claims here there must be some federal element. However, that's not in his definition. His definition does not include any federal element. To go over his definition again, an assemblage resisting law by force or intimidation for public purpose. It doesn't say anything about a federal element. He just pulled that out of his ass. I don't know where the hell he got that from. It's definitely not in his definition. If it was, he should have said that that was in his definition. He said he keeps going back to this illogical idea that just because X doesn't happen doesn't mean X isn't true. Yeah, that's true, but it also doesn't mean X is true. So making the claim that, well, wait a second, Andrew, Just because they weren't actually charged with insurrection doesn't mean they weren't guilty of insurrection. Well, that's nice, but it doesn't mean they were either. And I have the evidence on my side, as none of them were actually prosecuted for insurrection. None of them were prosecuted for insurrection, and Trump was acquitted for inciting insurrection. So the evidence is on my side. He would actually have to demonstrate that this was an insurrection and that they were all wrong, that they were completely incorrect in not charging it this way. He just keeps saying, well, there's a variety of reasons why they didn't. Well, that's nice. Couldn't one of the reasons be because it wasn't an insurrection? Yes, that seems to be a very obvious reason, doesn't it? Going back to my opening, I just want to kind of point out that Destiny has changed his entire idea on this, whereas at first he claimed in 2021 this was in no way an insurrection, that it fit the criteria of a riot better from anybody who's looking at it objectively. I agree with him. That's exactly what it fits. But he still has not demonstrated at all that this was actually an insurrection. He just says, well, I have this nebulous definition. He also says, give me a counter definition. It's not my burden to give you a counter definition. What do you mean? I'm not calling him insurrectionist. You're calling him insurrectionist. I don't have to define for you what that means. You have to define for me what that means. Giving me these four elements here is meaningless unless you can tell me what goes in those categories specifically that does not go in the category for rioting. Because as I look at an assemblage, resisting any law by force or intimidating or for public, that could all just be rioting. That does not really tell me what goes in the category. You didn't include federal anything. So I would like for you to actually expand on this definition so I can understand what the hell you're talking about and why the J6ers specifically fit this criteria.
All right. That is 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Destiny, I'll turn it to you whenever you're ready. And we are in round 2 right now, the bottom of round.
Yeah, so people so there's two parts to the insurrection, two elements that I don't think would fit. So the first one is an assemblage. That would clearly fit a riot, I think, but it would fit a riot and it would fit an insurrection. The second part is resisting a particular law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. There are plenty of riots that aren't riots to resist like the implementation of a law or to interfere necessarily with like some government proceeding. We can imagine a million reasons why people might riot outside of a baseball game. People might riot in protest to a statement that was made or in relation to, I don't know, the outcome of a sporting event. Like there's tons of people that can riot that aren't rioting with the goal of resisting the implementation of a particular law or trying to interfere with the course of some government proceeding. So the part two, the second element I've listed, really wouldn't comport with most riots. And then the third one is the third element by force or intimidation. I would say that riots generally have a forceful or intimidating aspect to them, although they generally happen spontaneously. Usually they're not planned in advance to use like force or intimidation. To quote Justice Greer, quote, legal authorities carefully distinguished planned insurrections from spontaneous riots. Justice Robert Greer charged the grand jury in the United States v. Hanway that a defendant who was not leagued with violent resistors to federal law could not be prosecuted for treason. Greer insisted that spontaneous riots were not insurrections, that insurrections required a commitment to use force to resist law, not spur-of-the-moment violence. Most riots just kind of like happen. It's pretty rare that they are planned in advance. And I think we all agree that if they are planned in advance, it takes on a much different character and arguably could call under it like different types of crimes. If people engage in rioting, it's not good. But if people are literally planning it out in advance, we are calling in a whole bunch of different crimes there than just the simple thing of calling a particular thing a riot. And then for the fourth thing, when we say for a public purpose, the fourth element, this is the second thing that I don't think most riots would necessarily be in opposition to, that we are insurrecting for some sort of public grievance relating to like the actions of a particular government. So like you might riot, for instance, like BLM might riot against like police violence, but there's not like a particular federal statute or federal law there. In terms of me specifying the federal part, well, I mean, J6 was a insurrection against like a federal entity. Again, if we want to talk about like state insurrections or something, I guess we can, but the differentiating factor here, the reason why I have the federal part is because we're talking about federal insurrections, and especially for the 14th Amendment, the federal insurrection part is what we're kind of talking about. I'm not even sure if you can do a state insurrection, maybe you can. But I mean, like summarizing this argument, like the Colorado court found that Donald Trump acted as part of an assemblage okay, that he helped bring into being. He called the people there. Trump was resisting the enforcement of federal and constitutional rules. He was contravening the 12th Amendment, and he was resisting the Electoral Count Act. Donald Trump, he took numerous illegal actions to prevent the peaceful transition of presidential power. This is like a function of the government. He engaged in an ongoing course of conduct aimed at producing violent resistance to the peaceful transfer of presidential power, and he was attempting to incite support to attack Congress. Yeah. Whether or not somebody's charged doesn't matter. Okay.
That is time. So what I'll do is that concludes round 2. Andrew, I'll turn it back to you unless you want me to give Destiny a little bit extra time, and I can give you that extra time as well on the back end, but I'll let you choose that.
Yeah, I'm fine. He can finish.
Okay. Destiny, go ahead and finish. And
sure. The final point was that but my final statement is, okay, if you looked at the Colorado court case, they found that Donald Trump acted as part of an assemblage that he helped bring into being. It said that Trump was resisting the enforcement of federal and constitutional rules, that Trump took numerous illegal actions to prevent the peaceful transition of presidential power. He engaged in an ongoing course of conduct aimed at producing violent resistance to the peaceful transfer of presidential power. He attempted to incite his supporters to attack Congress, which they did, and that Trump's speech occurred sufficiently close in time and place to when and where the insurrection took place to be considered an incitement. Like every single part of this, like very easily and very cleanly meets the definition of insurrection. If we want to argue that my definition isn't clean or that my 4 elements aren't being met, that's, well, I don't know how we can argue that. I think all 4 elements are being met. If we want to argue that, well, every single riot would, fall into this, then we could say, well, fine, Destiny, I agree. For your definition of insurrection, fine, January 6th was an insurrection. Now let's talk about these other events, and we could talk about whether they fit or don't fit. Or you can give me your own definition of insurrection, and then we can go from there.
Okay, that added an extra 55 seconds. So we'll go into round 3. Andrew, I will give you that. So you will have 3 minutes and 55 seconds to your time. So I'll start at the clock now.
Yeah. So again, trying to put the burden on me to give you a definition of your claim is insane. As we went through your definition here, it's really funny because I'm going to use your own logic back to you. Just because they weren't charged with an insurrection doesn't mean it wasn't an insurrection. Oh, okay. Well, they were actually charged with elements of rioting. So I'm going to say it was actually rioting. And I'm also going to say that, wait a second, your definition here seems to be more about rioting than anything else by your own claim. An assemblage would fit a riot, says Destiny. That's his first claim. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. It wouldn't fit rioting itself, says Destiny, even though rioting itself is against the law. What do you mean? Of course it's impeding the law. Well, how could it not be impeding the law? Rioting itself is against the law. I don't know where the hell you came up with that. By force or intimidation, Destiny concedes riots require force for a public purpose. He concedes that's a riot. So really, under his definition, this is just a riot. The only thing that we're arguing about here is number 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Let's try this again. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. A riot itself is resisting the law because it's illegal to riot. So I don't understand how that, again, would not just be a riot. All of these things seem to fall into the category of what people were charged with, which is much more along and akin to rioting than it is any type of insurrection. He still hasn't told us the distinction that fits in this category, why this isn't a riot, even though everybody was charged under that kind of branch of rioting and not charged for insurrection. This is a garbage definition. It's totally nebulous, right? And he keeps on saying, well, wait a second, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and concede that unless you can go against all 4 of these points, why don't I actually have to do that? All I need to do is say, okay, all of these 4 points fit a different criteria better than insurrection. And apparently he agrees. He agrees on point 1, point 3, and point 4. The only thing he argues is point 2, but his argument for point 2 makes no sense because rioting itself is illegal. So therefore you are resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Well, the government proceeding is to enforce law. You would be interfering with the government enforcing law if you're rioting. So all of these fall under the better criteria of riot, which is, it's totally consistent in my mind because that was the criteria in which people were charged, not with insurrection. And I really need Destiny to answer to that.
Okay, that was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You still have a minute left, Andrew. You're going to concede that round then?
Yeah, I'll let him go ahead and answer to it.
Cool. So I will turn it back to you, Destiny. We're in round 3, and this is the second part of round 3. So your turn, Destiny. I'll start the clock back up for you.
breaking a law and resisting law are not the same thing. Usually when people riot, they're not rioting with the purpose of making arson or murder or whatever other crimes are being broken to make those legal things. Usually they're breaking laws, not with the intent of like resisting the implementation or the execution of those laws, or resisting or contravening the execution of like some function of government. When people were rioting on January 6th, the goal of that was to stop the execution of the Electoral Count Act. It was to stop the purpose of the government, the execution, the function of government to do the peaceful transfer of power. They weren't simply engaged in violence and breaking the law. They were resisting the carrying out of the law, the Electoral Count Act, the ECA. And I don't know, we can loop on this over and over again, but again, if I can show you in Kenosha, if I can show you in Seattle, if I can show you a riot, if I can give you a video of cities burning, of people screaming and throwing shit, of, property being destroyed or damaged, and then you were to go, wow, that kind of looks like a riot to me, I would go, yeah, it kind of does. However, nobody was actually charged with the crime of rioting. So do you change your mind on that? Probably wouldn't affect your opinion at all. Again, whether or not you levy a particular charge at a person is way different than whether or not a particular event was a thing. Remember, when you levy a charge at somebody, a criminal charge, what you're really saying is that you can take a person, an individual, and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that no reasonable mind would agree that something else could have happened in front of a jury. That's what criminal court is for. Proving that somebody engaged in a crime beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal court is not the standard that we use to declare a particular thing a thing. You don't have to prove in criminal court beyond a reasonable doubt that a thing was an insurrection or that a thing was a riot unless we were charging somebody with an actual crime.
Okay, that's 1:50 on the clock. So that concludes round 3. And I'm going to turn it to you, gentlemen. You guys can let me know what you want. We can either do another round of 3 minutes uninterrupted debating, if you guys want to formulate your arguments a bit more, because I know there is some...
I would like to do one more round if we could.
Or Destiny, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, and then after that, so we'll go into a 4th round with the 3-minute debate time limit where no interruptions. Then after that, we can get into the 5 minutes of discourse between you two where you can actually speak. But is that fair for everybody?
Sure.
Sure.
Cool. All right, so I will go ahead and reset the clock. This will be round 4. Take it away, Andrew.
Yeah, so this is an absurd argument. We'll go right back to Destiny's logic again. He says just because somebody wasn't charged with X doesn't mean X didn't happen. This is the same. This is complete and total obfuscation, by the way, because ultimately what's going on here is that these do fit the criteria much better for a riot. And under the purview of rioting, these are the types of charges which were levied at these people. Destiny says specifically under point 2, he said, and he didn't answer to this. He said, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding wouldn't fit rioting. Yes, it does fit rioting. It fits rioting better than anything else I can think of. Yes, you are immediately, upon rioting, resisting the law, and you are obstructing the law immediately. That is what a riot is. It's an unlawful assembly. So how he could say this, in fact, each point, he concedes on point 1, an assemblage that would fit a riot. An assemblage would fit a riot. That's point 1. He agrees. Okay. Point 3, by force or intimidation, he agrees on point 3 that is a riot. He agrees on point 4. He conceded on that as well. And then he just conceded on point 2. He couldn't exactly tell us why resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding wouldn't fit a riot. Of course it fits a riot. All of these, in fact, fit the events of January 6th perfectly. And if he's conceding that, hey, these fit a riot perfectly, the events of January 6th were a riot under this definition, which he essentially has conceded is true, then the charges were appropriate that this was a riot and not an insurrection. This could not have been an insurrection. His own definition proves that this is more akin to a riot. He still hasn't really told us, by the way, what an insurrection is, just these kind of 4 nebulous points. But these 4 nebulous points fit a riot perfectly. And he's basically conceded to 3 of them on the outset. And then on the second, he's basically conceded that as well, because resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding would fit a riot by its very nature. The reason it would fit a riot by its very nature is because it's immediately an unlawful assembly. You're resisting the law. You're resisting the police. You're resisting. So whether that's done at a federal level or a state level, I think it would still meet the same fate of being more akin to a riot. This definition really moves towards a riot and not towards an insurrection. He has not told us the distinction yet. And so, again, I think that the entire reason he wants this only painted as an insurrection, even though nobody's ever been charged with an insurrection, even though Trump was cleared of inciting an insurrection, is so that he can make justifications for why the other side deserves what it gets because they're a bunch of traitors. Thus far, no, I'm sorry. This definition nor this logic adds up. The logic of saying, well, just because they weren't charged with a thing doesn't mean it wasn't the thing. Fine, but that doesn't mean it was the thing either. And by your criteria, it seems like it was this other thing.
Okay, that's 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I will make the clock the same for you, Destiny, to keep it fair. I will start the timer if you're ready now.
Yeah, I guess we're just going to loop on these points. Resisting a law is not the same thing as breaking a law. If you could show me that there was a particular riot where people assembled and the goal of that riot was when they were rioting, they wanted to riot to make rioting legal, and that they had gathered, in order to change the law in a particular area, and they were going to use force and intimidation to do it. We're here to riot today because we're going to make rioting legal. Then sure, then we could argue that that's probably an insurrection. But I mean, these are the four elements that were historically understood at the time. Nobody had any issues at the time charging people with crimes of insurrection. Nobody had any confusion at the time historically. There was Shays' rebellions, the Whiskey insurrection, the Burr insurrection, John Brown's raids. You had convictions of, like a Pennsylvania farmer, I think, set fire to a house of a tax collector in 1794. He was charged with insurrection. John Freese and friends made a show of arms that resulted in the release of persons charged with federal tax evasion. That was considered an insurrection. In 1847, when Hispanic and Native Americans attacked occupying American officials in New Mexico, that was considered an insurrection. In 1851, when Pennsylvanians obstructed official efforts to capture an alleged fugitive slave, that was an insurrection. In 1856, when there were rival forces in the United States that were violently resisting the laws on slavery, that was considered insurrection. These aren't just like riots where people are like, we're mad and we're breaking the law by being violent. It was they were resisting the law. They were resisting an actual federal law claiming that particular law shouldn't exist. They were trying to air a public grievance through force or intimidation with an assembled group of people in the goal of overturning that particular thing through violent action. And then on this final thing, so there is a difference between resisting law and breaking a law. Just because you're engaged in a riot doesn't mean that you're resisting the implementation of law. People that are engaged in riots aren't usually rioting to make riots legal. That's what would make that the equivalent. And then just the crime of X is not the same thing as the event of X. I don't know why we keep saying this. Nobody was charged with insurrection, therefore there was no insurrection. If I walk into a room and I see a person's throat cut, can I not say that there was a murder here if nobody was charged with murder? If I see 20 people setting fire to a house and they all run away and nobody gets charged with arson, can I not say that an arson happened? If I look on video and I see that there's 500 people blowing up, some shit, and they manage to run away, or the cops, can't arrest any of these people or charge them with the formal, crime of rioting, does that mean there was no riot that took place? The crime of X is different than the event of X. And right now, we're talking about if January 6th was an insurrection. Not did any individual person engage in the criminal behavior of insurrection. That would be a separate conversation. If we want to have that conversation, we could, but we would have to first concede that an insurrection did indeed take place on January 6th. And I believe that the Colorado Supreme Court engaged in good analysis, and they decided that an insurrection had taken place because it comports with all four elements that I gave to an insurrection that were commonly understood in the historical and legal record around the time that the 14th Amendment was passed, when they were putting insurrection in the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to prevent prior oath takers from holding office again who had engaged in insurrection.
Okay. So that completes round 4 of the 3-minute uninterrupted rounds. If you guys are okay with it, we will move on to the 5-minute round where you guys are able to actually have open discourse.
Well, I have a quick counter if Destiny wants to agree to this for the purpose of fairness. I'm willing to do 2 rounds of internal critiques, and I'll allow Destiny to start with an internal critique if I can move to an internal critique after. So 2 5-minute rounds of internal critiques. Does that sound fair?
What do we mean when we say internal critique? What does that mean?
It means that I'm just here to answer your questions for 5 minutes, and you're here to answer mine.
Sure.
Okay, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so just so I make sure I have this right, so I can moderate it properly. Is he going to question you, Andrew, and you're going to...
Yeah, he gets round 1, 5 minutes, and then I get round 2, 5 minutes.
Okay, so basically, so it's essentially a Q&A between the two of you where, so our Destiny, if you're okay with that, we can do that, or we can go to just open discourse between the two of you where you...
I feel like I'd probably, because I feel like part of my argument is going to be that he hasn't put forth a positive position yet for me to even attack or interrogate, so I'm not even sure what I would do on the Inquisition round. So I feel like it'd be better to just do back and forth.
Okay, well, if you want to do it back and forth, I'm prepared for that too.
Okay, but you guys are good with no more. You don't need any more 3-minute rounds to solidify your stance. No. Okay, so I will go ahead and set the timer here for 5 minutes. I guess who wants to kick it off?
I can kick it off real quick.
Okay.
So, Destiny, would you agree with me that the motivation for demonizing the opposition political party often revolves around calling them traitors, accusing them of treason, and pushing for some type of villainization that they are against the country, they are against you, they are against everybody?
For another debate, maybe, but that's not at all any of the subject matter here.
Well, I think it is. I think it ties in because I believe that the motivation for why you're claiming that the other side are a bunch of insurrectionists, though you have no direct evidence of this, and your own criteria is just that of basically a riot, that your motivation is just to demonize the opposition.
Sure, but this isn't a debate over my motivation. I could be motivated by 100 million different bad faith factors, and literally none of them would be relevant to this conversation. It could be the fact that the DNC actually paid me money to give this precise argument, and Kamala's on the phone with me right now, and it wouldn't have any impact on this particular debate.
I think it would be. I think that the motivation for why you're making the argument itself would have an impact on the debate. But I am willing to concede that if you just want to keep it to the material, we can. Let's move over to point 2 then. Point 2, you say resisting any law or interference with the course of a government proceeding wouldn't fit rioting itself. How does that not fit rioting itself? Of course it does.
Well, let's say, for instance, the purpose of a riot was because you felt like the law wasn't being enforced. It wouldn't make sense to call that part of an insurrection. Let's say, for instance, that there was
I agree.
Let's say that there was a lynching of a person and you felt like the cops weren't, upholding their duty or whatever. And so you decided to have a protest that turns into a riot, and you all show up with the goal of protesting and rioting because you felt like the law wasn't being carried out here. You wouldn't really call that an insurrection because they're not trying to contravene a legal process. Just because, again, you engage in unlawful conduct doesn't mean that you're trying to resist, like the implementation of the carrying out, resisting the laws.
That would be the same case with insurrection then.
No, because when you're insurrecting,
would
you're
also
trying to
require
say,
intent. Right?
Yes, yeah, correct, yes. So the intent would be the contravening of the Electoral Count Act. When people say we need to march and make our voices heard on January 6th to the Capitol grounds where people are going to protest, they're protesting the execution of the Electoral Count Act, which demanded that Vice President Pence count the electoral votes. Donald Trump didn't want that. He made it very clear in the days preceding. Him, Bannon, Eastman, Chesbrough, and everybody else that was working alongside him, Sidney Powell, everybody else, was saying that we need to prevent Pence from counting the electoral vote. That was the execution of a lawful government function.
Yeah, but even if all
that's what people are going there to protest
Yeah,
against.
but even if all that's true, Destiny, it still wouldn't matter because the events of January 6th themselves, the intent of the people could have just been to riot, not indeed to commit to any sort of treasonous insurrection activity. And you have failed to demonstrate this time and time again, how this actually would meet the criteria of an insurrection. Them showing up, and just like your take in 2021, right? When you say, hey, look, the damage would have been way worse if they had shown up with the purposes of actual insurrection or some type of 1776 mindset. This is the most armed nation on planet Earth. How in the world can you say these people showed up specifically in order to do that? That makes no sense, man.
None of this law, none of that argumentation was subject to. People they obviously showed up to protest the certification of the vote. They were called there by Donald Trump
if
on
it's
January
a non
6th.
sequitur, then you in 2021 were using a non sequitur when you made the argument that from the appearance of this, it could not have been an insurrection.
2021 Destiny was incorrect because 2021 Destiny didn't have the historical context to understand an insurrection. If you want to bring him on here and talk to him, you can, but I don't agree with everything that I said.
You're not you.
I am 2024 Destiny. I have learned more things. I have done more studying. I've read more papers, and I've done more research on this. There is actually a strong understanding of what an insurrection is, and there was a strong historical understanding of what an insurrection is. And the idea that a bunch of people were called on January 6th, the date wasn't a mistake. When Donald Trump sent them down there to protest, when he said we need Mike Pence to do the right thing, what was he talking about? He wanted him to contravene the law, and that's what people marched down there for them to do.
Donald Trump said 30 minutes before this began that this needed to remain a peaceful protest.
No, he didn't.
Twitter.
He never said that.
He did. I actually have the tweet. I have the tweet. He did say that.
In the speech, he said to fight like hell, and in the speech, he said that we need to go down.
I'm talking about his tweets.
Why would I say? Why is a tweet
why would a person
dispositive?
put out a tweet to be peaceful if their intent was insurrection, Destiny?
Why would a person call a protest on January 6th? What do you think they were protesting?
What do you mean? They call protest. People call protests all the time. That doesn't mean
we're not talking about other protests. I'm asking you, what was the purpose of the protest on January 6th?
The purpose of the protest was to go out and show support for Donald J. Trump.
For what?
Well, there was a variety of reasons. I
No,
think that
give me. Wait. Are you telling me we can't
I'm going to
understand
give
what
you
the
a
January
variety of
6th
reasons.
protest
You
was
can't
about?
say no. Are you saying there wasn't a variety of reasons why people didn't show up?
Nope. I think there was one clear reason.
Oh, there's only one reason why
One
everybody
clear reason.
showed up.
Correct.
Second, 10 seconds.
Okay, what is the one clear reason? There was not a variety of reasons. Some people didn't show up just because they wanted to see what was happening. Some people didn't show up just to support the president. Some people didn't show up because they really like to go to protest. Everybody showed up for one reason. Right,
I didn't say
Destiny?
everybody showed up for one reason. I said they were called there for one reason, and that was to protest the certification of the election.
Guys, that is time. I'm happy to let this play out longer if you guys want, and add an extra minute to the clock. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, we can
sure.
add an extra minute. I'm fine with that.
Clock, and this is still round one of the open discourse, but just try to limit it to 1 minute, and then we'll go into round two of it, and we can go from there. And if we need more rounds at the 5 minute mark, we can now do that. So
I have a problem with him ascribing motivation to all. He says there's one clear reason why everybody showed up. That's clearly not true. That doesn't even logically make sense. He could never demonstrate in a million years that there was only one clear reason why everybody showed up. That's a nonsensical argument, Destiny.
That's not the argument that I'm making. If the debate
was the argument you made.
if the debate is whether or not January 6th is an insurrection, not did every single person on January 6th engage in the crime of insurrection, or did every single person on January 6th go with the intent to commit
Then why
an
did you say
insurrection?
there was one clear
I
reason
said
why
that there was a
everybody showed
clear
up?
reason why people were called there, because there was. Donald Trump called people there to protest not on January 5th and not on January 7th and not in a random part of DC and not in a random part of the country. He called them on January 6th to the ellipses that was less than a mile walk away from the Capitol building, which is where he sent every single person after his speech. He called them there on the day of the certification of the votes
That
after
doesn't tell
spending
us their
days
motivation.
trying to pressure Pence to overturn the election.
That
He
doesn't
told
tell
them
us their
that they need to go and
motivation,
protest for the lawful slates of electors to be counted, the illegitimate ones that he submitted, and people went
Bro,
there.
even
They
if I grant
engaged
your
in violent
logic, it makes
behavior,
no sense.
and they managed to delay the certification of the election, which is
Destiny,
exactly
even
what
if
they. So then, do you admit then that they
No, I
happened to
don't
do
admit
exactly
anything,
what
even if I grant your
they
logic.
they happened to do every single
Destiny,
thing that an
Destiny,
insurrection
give me a
called
chance
for
to
without
respond.
actually engaging in an insurrection?
Give me a chance to respond. So I not only do I concede nothing, but your logic.
we ran out of time on that round. So what I'll do is this. I can see that this is a dynamic conversation, and clearly it's going to go out the bounds sometimes of a time round. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set the clock for 10 minutes. That completes round one of the open discourse. But I see that this is a dynamic argument, and me just stopping it randomly at 5 minutes would probably be stupid. So I'm going to let it play out. I'll put 10 minutes on the clock and have you guys go at it. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Sure.
Destiny, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, because I don't want to interrupt you guys again like that. So I'll just go ahead and put 10 minutes on the clock, and I will start it right now. You guys, you can pick right off where you left off.
Yeah.
And sorry about that.
So to respond, right, and I'll be more charitable with the time back your way now that we have 10 minutes, Destiny, but it's actually an illogical argument to make, to say, even if Donald Trump had some certain intent in his head, that would not mean that the people who were showing up for the protest had that intent. So the thing is like, for both ways, it's a double entendre for your own logic. Either one, you claim, wait a second, there's one clear reason everybody showed up, or two, no, there was no clear reason why everybody showed up. They had multiple motivations, even if Trump himself had a different motivation. This is illogical argumentation.
I'm sorry, but this would never be applied to anything. If somebody says, hey guys, we're all going to show up
That's
so that
not
we
an
can go
argument
and I'm making the argument right now. If somebody were to make the call and say, hey guys, we're all going to show up to go and blow this building up, and a bunch of people showed up, and then a bunch of them marched with the crowd, and then they all went and a building got blown up, we wouldn't say like, oh, well, we don't know what the intention of the crowd was. We don't know what the intention of the leader there was. We don't know what actually happened there, because we can't divine the intention of every single individual person.
That's a ridiculous straw
We
man.
can say that's, you can call it a straw man, but the idea
is.
that in order for me, okay, hold on. What would I need to
So
show
hang on,
then?
let me
What would I?
respond
No,
to your
wait,
first
hold on.
argument,
What would
and
I
then
need to
no,
show?
wait,
What would
wait,
I
wait,
need
no,
to
there's no
show?
spurging. Let me
I'm not
respond to the
spurging, but
argument,
you're not
and
even
then you
letting
can
me. Letting me talk. You can respond to my argument. You can phrase the question as
made
part of
an
this.
argument. Let me respond, and then you can ask the second argument. I think that that's fair.
Okay.
So when you're talking about this from a logical standpoint, when you say, "Oh, if somebody called and said, hey, we're all going to blow this building up," yes, I would agree that you could probably ascribe the motivation to it. Then can you show me a tweet or any type of anything from Donald Trump saying, "Hey, hey guys, show up, we're going to do an insurrection? No, he just made the shit up.
Okay, fine. So I can. So as part of Donald Trump's speech, I'll give you 2 quotes. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore. And that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. Today, I will lay out just some of the evidence proving that we won this election. We won it by a landslide. This was not a close election. The first quote. The second quote, we must stop the steal. And then we must ensure that such outrageous election fraud never happens again, can never be allowed to happen again. When he says stop the steal, when they're at the Capitol building on January 6th, and when the election is being certified, what does stop the steal mean there?
Wait a second. So, first of all, you're attributing to Donald Trump's rhetoric here something which he may not have intended. None of that actually shows or demonstrates that he was calling for an insurrection on the Capitol. You are just kind of ascribing that motivation onto it for the purposes of convenience. You have to show me there where he calls, like your example was, if I say we're all going to show up and blow up this building, that was your example, and then people show up and do it, we can understand their motivation. I agree. You have to show me where he says, okay, guys, we're all going to show up and do an insurrection. You can't then take words that don't say anything about an insurrection and say, but I think he meant that, though.
So then just before I answer this, what would I have to show you to show that an insurrection was what Trump was planning? What kind of evidence
you would have
would
to
you
give
need?
me you would have to give me the criteria first and foremost of something which fit the criteria of an insurrection better than some other thing. And you would have to make it refutable to that thing from what people were charged under. So if the criteria is, I'm going to give you what I think an insurrection is, and it fits a different criteria better than an insurrection, and under that criteria, that's what people were basically charged under, then it sounds like the other thing makes more sense than an insurrection.
So we're going with the argument
totally
that for
seems to
X
track
event
me.
to have happened, X, like some person needs to have been charged with the crime?
No, your logic there is faulty
Then
as
why
well.
why do you have the second
No,
element
let me
there for
respond.
me proving?
Let me
Well, hold on,
respond.
you can't
So-
just talk for 20 minutes and then as soon as I say one
well, I
sentence,
didn't.
you ramble
You
for
can't
another
ask me
20
a
minutes.
question
Okay?
and then move to another
I can ask you a
question.
question and then ask another question as part of my question. I'm able to do
Yeah,
that.
but I
right?
wasn't even
You
able
gave
to
two
respond.
elements to what I needed to prove. The second one was that I have to show why people weren't charged with a crime. I've answered this thing 50 million times. We can center on just as one point if you want. Just because somebody hasn't been charged with the crime of X doesn't mean that an event related to X didn't occur. This is true of
Yeah, but
literally
the
every
opposite
single
would
time.
equally be true. The opposite is also true. Just because they weren't charged with the crime of X doesn't mean they committed the crime of X either,
I'm not
Destiny.
making that argument. You're using this argument as a way to negate my argument. Just
yes,
because I'm not making
it's called a counter argument. Yes.
No, hold on. That would be like you saying John couldn't have murdered Jane because John wasn't there, and then I say, well, no, that's not true. And then you going, well, just because John was there doesn't mean that he murdered Jane.
Nope,
that's
the
not
opposite.
The element that I'm
Nope,
giving.
the opposite
I've
is
given
true.
you 4 clear things.
Wait,
Would you
wait.
like-
No,
would
wait,
you
wait,
like to
hang on. The
give me
opposite
an
is true.
argument that, or give me a definition of insurrection, or do you think
Stop,
it's
stop,
undefinable
stop.
thing?
Hang on. The opposite is true. I'm not saying that. So you say, oh, John murdered Jane, but that can't be true because he also may not have murdered Jane. You're making the claim John murdered Jane. And so I say, okay, that's your claim that he murdered Jane. Can you define for me what the criteria would be in which you would consider this to be murder? And you go, well, and then you define for me something that is not murder or fits some other criteria better. Would not a rational human being, including you,
Halfway.
take that and understand, wait, if it fits this other criteria better, it probably isn't actually murder?
What part of my... Can you give me an example? I'm just curious, and I shouldn't even engage with this because so just up to this point, you've given me no definition of insurrection. You seem unwilling to commit to a
It's
single
not my
definition.
burden.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just saying you've given me no definition
I'm
of
not gonna-
insurrection.
I'm
You
not-
seem
I'm
unwilling to
giving
do
you
so.
nothing.
So then my
It's not my
question
burden
would
to
be:
prove.
can you give me a
It's not my
riot?
burden.
Can you give me a riot that would fit all 4 points that I've given of
Not
what
my
I've
burden to
defined
do.
insurrection? Well, then you must accept my definition of insurrection.
I
Because
don't need
you're
to
saying that,
accept-
you're saying
why
that
would
my
I need to
definition,
accept your definition?
Because you're saying that my definition of insurrection isn't valid because it also applies to riots, and I'm telling you very clearly, no, it doesn't, because riots don't typically happen in a planned manner to contravene the execution of some government function or the implementation of some particular law.
That's
So
not
I'm
what your
asking
definition
you-
says.
I
Your
said
definition says
it's
under point 2,
resisting some
any
law
law.
or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Correct.
Yeah, so you're just changing your definition.
I'm not resisting. Do you think that resisting a law is the same thing as breaking a law?
I think that it could be synonymous inside of people's minds, but no, I could see the distinction with merit. But when you say resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding, that sure sounds like a riot to me, Destiny.
Okay, can you give me an example of a riot where that happens?
where BLM burned down a police station. That seems like it's resisting
that's
the law.
Yeah, so that's what law were they resisting the implementation of? What law were
the
they
law
resisting?
of arson, the law of rioting, all
Okay.
sorts of laws.
So you're telling me that those riots were trying to make it so that arson was legal? Can you point me to a tweet? Can you point me to a statement where somebody was saying we're rioting because we think that the laws against arson are
Wait a
illegal?
second. Can you show me in your definition where it says that the purpose of the insurrection is so that they can make something else legal? Because that's nowhere in your definition, doesn't it?
Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding.
Doesn't say
Yes.
anything about making something else legal. You just made it up.
No, you're saying that they're resisting the law of arson. Nobody is arguing that the law of arson is bad. Just because you're breaking a law doesn't mean you're resisting the law.
What's the or?
The or for what?
3 minutes.
It says or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Would you not consider if somebody interfered with the FBI, for instance, for that to be interfering with the course of a government proceeding? Or if somebody interfered with police officers, that would be interfering with the course of a government
Police
proceeding?
officers are not federal police officers.
They
If you
don't-
want to
but
talk about
federal-
interfering with,
federal's
if you
not
want to talk
required.
about, if you want to, where you are, because we're talking about January
It's
6th.
not. We have your definition. It's not
Where did
required.
January 6th happen?
But it does. We have your definition.
Why would I be
Destiny.
arguing about the definition of an insurrection in a state when we're talking about an insurrection that happened
Well,
on the
then
Capitol
can you
grounds?
show me in your definition where it says it must be federal? For
I don't
an
need
insurrection
to. We're
occur?
talking about an insurrection that
then
occurred
if
on
it
federal
doesn't-
grounds.
It doesn't matter. So then any of the criteria which would apply at the state level would still apply at the federal level for rioting. It's the
I
same
don't know if
thing.
insurrections are state defined. I'm not aware of that in the historical record. Can you
Well, you
point
can't
somewhere
have a
where you
state
can
insurrection. Why
I'm not
couldn't
aware
you?
of some. Can you show me where in the historical record where that's ever
I'm
been
just
stated?
asking why you couldn't have one.
Because I'm not aware of any having occurred historically.
That doesn't mean you couldn't have one.
You just claimed that it's
I
possible.
didn't make a claim.
Oh, okay. Then we're not. No one is claiming here that an insurrection in a state is
No,
possible.
you
Okay,
are
cool.
making
Gotcha.
a
All
claim.
right.
You're making a claim
I'm
on
making
your
a
4
positive
points.
claim that there could be a federal insurrection
right.
because I have a historical record of there being statements about insurrections federally and historically. I've never had a statement about a state insurrection. I'm not aware of any of those. If you are aware
but
of one
you
of those,
not
feel free
being
to tell
aware
me.
of any doesn't mean that the criteria could not apply to a state insurrection, correct?
That's correct, but we are talking
Yeah,
about
that's
an
correct.
insurrection that happened on federal grounds, so we're obviously
Yeah,
talking
I
about
agree,
federal
but your
insurrections.
definition doesn't require federal anything. That's not what
so
your
we have
definition
no-
requires.
Okay, I think if the only holdout you have is that your definition of resisting a particular law just means that you are breaking a law, then I think I'm satisfied at ending it.
No, it's not. Or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. This could be localized or
It
non-localized.
can't be. No one here has made any claims
Yeah, it
about
can
a
be.
non-federal insurrection. Okay, well, if those are your two holdouts that you think
Well,
that
okay.
resisting
Well,
a law
what
is
is
the same as breaking
what
a
is
law,
or
or that
interfering with the
of
course of a government proceeding mean? What does that mean?
The record that I'm invoking, we're especially talking about things relating to insurrection, and we're talking about the invocation of insurrection, which is my understanding has only ever happened in federal law and in stuff relating to the United States government, not a state government. If you want to show me it happening, or show me a historical record, or a state constitution, or a state criminal statute that references insurrection, then we can talk about that if you want to. But
What
we're
does
arguing
or
about-
interfering with the course of a government proceeding mean, Destiny?
or interfering with the course of the implementation or the execution
30
of some
seconds.
particular federal law?
It has to be federal?
Yes, because we're talking about the federal government. We're
No,
talking
that
about
doesn't mean it.
insurrection.
Hang on.
Yeah.
So you're doing a classic kind of Destiny bait and switch, where you say in this particular case it would, because that's what we're talking about. Okay, that's fair, but that doesn't mean that that's what the definition says. The definition itself does not say that it must be federal.
Who-
It
you
doesn't
even
say
agree
that.
with my what
Hang on.
definition are you even
It
referring to
doesn't
here?
say that anywhere. What does or interfering with the course of a government proceeding
10 minutes?
mean? What does it mean?
That real quick, guys. That is 10 minutes. What I could do is, because I see that there's a discussion here between federal, if an insurrection can be federal or state, I will go ahead and reset the clock. I think maybe this is something that we can kind of hone in on. Can an insurrection be? Obviously we're talking about it from federal level, but can also be at a state level. Do you guys want to shift that conversation to there and make this round specifically for that? Are you guys okay with that?
I don't know. A state insurrection. I'm just not even aware of that even being a thing. I don't think I've ever heard of
Well,
it.
I don't know, Destiny. Were the DC cops local?
I'll put the clock for
The
5
DC cops were federal.
No, all of them were federal, eh?
The District of Columbia is federal. Yes,
so they
it's
have
federal.
no state police there at all?
What state police would they have there?
I don't know. I'm just asking.
I don't believe so. No, I'm pretty sure even the National Guard there directly, like the chain of command goes up to the president, not a state governor.
Do states have state governments?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't understand why you couldn't have an insurrection against a state government by
You
this
should
definition.
consult the historical record and come with an example next time.
Well, just because you never have one, I'm asking you if you can.
I'm not here to debate whether or not you can have an insurrection against a state government. I'm here to debate whether or not January 6th was an insurrection because January 6th. No, this is like asking if a murder occurred on January 6th. In that case, I would only be talking about murder as it's defined in federal law, not in state law. We're talking about an insurrection on whether or not January 6th was an insurrection or not. So I'm only going to be appealing to federal law or federal historical understandings of an insurrection against the United States. So I don't know why we're saying, well, what about a state insurrection? I don't know. I'm not even aware if a state insurrection is a possible thing. I've never heard of that reference before. It's not semantic. It's legal and it's historical, and that's where the understanding is rooted in.
I'm fine with a semantic distinction. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm actually just trying to make one. So you agree that you gave me a definition that it nowhere includes the word federal, correct?
I also didn't give you a definition that includes the word human, or that includes the words like in this present point of time and not like in the future or time traveling in the past, or that doesn't include like dimension C138, or that like there's a million other things that I didn't include. Because
I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Because why would I include the definition of against the United States when we're talking about an insurrection that happened on federal grounds?
Because
if you want, I could simply add. Okay, well, in that case, I will simply add on my second part.
Aren't you appealing to a state court, for instance? Like, what are you talking about here?
Appealing to a state court for what?
Aren't you appealing to a state court for this definition? Isn't that what you said? Did I get that wrong?
I'm appealing to right now. I'm appealing to federal history. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm asking, where did you get this definition? Let's start with that.
There's a writer who studied I think it was constitutional law specializing in the 14th Amendment. His name is Mark Graber, and these are the 4 qualifications that he basically lists out, and then he goes through a number of historical examples to say as much. There's also a much longer paper written about the I think it's like the sweeping power of Section 3, written by I think Baud and Paulson, who write like a 130-page paper where they go through listing like the historical understanding of insurrection. If you want, we can dive through any part of the paper, or we can dive through any part of the definition.
Does he say in this paper that it's a requirement that this be done at the federal level?
I don't think anybody talks about state insurrections. I don't think you can levy war or engage in insurrection against a state. I'm just not aware of that. I've never heard of that brought up before.
Yeah,
like, I don't think, like, for instance, like when you say treason, if I were to give you a definition of treason, I don't know if you can commit treason against like the state of Iowa. I think that's only a federal crime.
I have no idea either. This is why I'm asking.
I can't say for sure because maybe there is evidence of it out there, but I didn't come prepared to debate that because it's a debate about federal insurrection.
All I'm doing
6th.
is doing an internal critique to try to figure out if this is consistent across the board, your definition. I'm not even saying that there's necessarily anything wrong with it, but what I am saying is that there's something wrong with the fact that it seems to fit rioting far better than it would in insurrection. So if we go over these one at a time, an assemblage would fit a riot. That's what Destiny says. By force or intimidation fits a riot. That's what Destiny says.
Well, it's an assemblage of people of people for a common purpose. Okay,
Yeah.
An assemblage of people. Yes. So
Riot.
they've come for a common purpose. Okay, and then 2 is to resist any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Right, resisting a law. Resisting a law. That's not just breaking a law, but you're there to resist a particular law. There's one you really don't like, and then 3, you're showing up for force or intimidation.
We have the or there. We have the or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Wouldn't that be even resisting police? Wouldn't that qualify for that?
No, a government proceeding would be like the Senate confirming like an officer of the executive agency, or like
you
would
have to demonstrate that. I don't believe that that's true. I think that you can interfere with government proceedings, even absent there being some actual proceeding that you're interfering with. I think that
if you would like to introduce
localized laws,
that's fine. And if you would like to introduce your own unique definition of insurrection, you can do that.
But I do that
because I'm unaware in the historical record of anybody suggesting that interfering with police officers is a matter of insurrection or can lead to an element of insurrection.
Are there laws against rioting?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know there's laws against like things that happen in rioting. I don't know if there's like a law of rioting.
Are you resisting those laws when you're rioting?
No.
You're not resisting those laws when you're rioting?
No, unless you're literally rioting to say we should make rioting legal or we need to get rid of the prohibition on rioting.
And that
why would that be a qualification to resist the laws?
Because breaking the law and do you acknowledge that breaking the law and resisting the law are not the same thing?
Well, tell me what the distinction is so I'm not confused anymore.
Breaking a law is when you do something that's illegal, and resisting the law is saying that this particular law shouldn't exist.
Yeah, okay, but if you're rioting, how do you go about resisting a law?
Well, you could riot for the purpose of overturning a particular law. You might say,
Yeah,
I
but
don't
you're
like
resisting other laws then, right?
No, you're not. You're not saying that rioting should be made legal.
Yeah, but even if you weren't, you would still be resisting laws that were on the books against rioting.
So if I can't divorce, okay, we can just disagree here. If you think that resisting and breaking the law are the same thing, we're at an impasse.
I
We
didn't
can't
say
go
that
there.
they're the same thing. I said that necessarily, if you're rioting to resist some other external law. So let's say I
You
think
can,
that
hold
there's
on.
some-
Do you agree? We
I
can do
think
this
I-
real
let's
easy.
say-
Do you agree that you
hang
can
on,
engage in
bro.
rioting? No. Do you agree that you can engage in rioting and accept that you might get arrested for rioting?
Yeah.
Then that defeats your entire argument. You can
How?
engage in rioting without resisting the law of rioting, understanding that,
Yeah,
well, I'm going to
but
riot, but I might be arrested
actually,
for
that
it.
makes my argument. That makes my argument. So the thing is that even if I concede that it's true, that you could be, rioting with the expectation that you get arrested for this X thing, right? You could do this for murder as well. You could do this for basically anything. You could commit any crime with the expectation that you could be arrested for the crime itself. But that would not say that you're not resisting whatever the current laws were that were on the books about that crime. You're saying that the necessity here is that you are resisting some other thing. Fine. But you're also resisting laws by the very nature of rioting. So I don't know why you would have to have something which is externalized while you yourself are still breaking laws. I don't
How
think...
are you resisting the law? How are you resisting laws of rioting by rioting? What does
because-
resist mean to you, though? How are you defining
assuming-
resist?
Yeah. So assuming, I can give you an example of this. Let us assume for a second that people are rioting in an abortion clinic because they want abortion overturned. I think this is the spirit of your argument, right?
Yep.
So they're rioting in an abortion clinic. They want abortion to be overturned. You would agree with me then that they are pushing against abortion, but they're still breaking laws while they're rioting, right? So they are resisting current laws, even though they're resisting another current law. And I don't think that you would consider that to be an insurrection, even though it could fit all of the criteria of these elements. It's an assemblage, for sure. You're resisting some other law that you don't like, or you're interfering with the course of a government proceeding. You would say that that fits criteria too. You would say that this is by force or intimidation, and you would say it's for a public purpose. But that clearly is not an insurrection, Destiny.
The issue is that, like, abortion is not like this isn't a federal law. I could just grant you that. We can move to the state example since you seem unable or unwilling to differentiate.
Let's
between
assume for a
state or
second that
federal
it
law.
was. Let's assume for a second it was a federal law.
Okay, you know what? Actually, we can do that. Let's say
Yeah.
that the federal government passed a law either allowing or not allowing all abortion. Okay, the government either allows it, everybody can have an abortion whenever they want, or nobody can have an abortion. Okay, let's say that I gather a group of people and I say, listen, okay, fuck this abortion law. We're all going to get together and we're going to go protest. Okay, and we're protesting. The goal of our protest, all right, is we want to get rid of the abortion thing, whether it was passed or made illegal, okay? We want to get rid of this law. And we're going to show up with a whole bunch of fucking people, and shit's going to get ratty, and we're going to, we know what we're doing, okay? It's the day that in Capitol Hill that they're going to sign the law into whatever. We march down there, and in the course of protesting, like, it becomes a riot, and the riot and everything there was because of that particular law being signed into practice. I would say, yeah, that was an insurrection. You've shown up with a group of people, you're resisting the passage of some particular law, you're showing up through force or intimidation, and you end up exercising that, and then it's for the public purpose of a particular law that impacts everybody in the United States. I would say that is an insurrection, yes. Would you say it's not?
If
would you
a
say that
bunch
that's
of
not an
people-
insurrection?
Yeah, I would say that it would not be an insurrection, at least by this criteria. That would just seem to me, again, to be a riot. That would seem to fit the criteria, again, of a riot better than an insurrection. I still can't exactly figure out the delineation point, and I'm trying to. And now, to be fair to you, it is nebulous. I understand it's nebulous.
It's
but
not.
I'm also not the one who's making the affirmative claim. You are. So you're saying that if a bunch of fucking dope smoking hippies wanted to resist the federal law of being able to smoke marijuana on federal land, and they all showed up and they got stoned, and then they started rioting, that would be a fucking insurrection?
If they went there with a common purpose, they were trying to resist the implementation or execution of a particular law, yeah, theoretically it could.
Well,
yeah.
no, they're just resisting, right? They're just resisting a law. They're saying, we're here to protest the fact, man, that we can't smoke weed on federal property, man. So they all grab their blunts and they start toking up in protest,
That's
right?
like-
and then they start a fire
What do you have? I need
and kick
okay,
some stuff. And
so
kick some stuff.
Do you think that
is that? Hang on, I just want to make sure. You think
It could be,
that
yes.
that would
Yes.
be an insurrection?
The historical record, it could be, yes. Do you have any
Lord.
definition of insurrection whatsoever, or do you just think
Don't
they're not
need to
real?
give you a counter definition.
If you're not going to give me a counter definition, I can give you the riot definition doesn't include necessarily a public purpose. I've already given examples of riots that wouldn't fit my definition of insurrection, and I really only need to give one, and I automatically win. A riot could very much be in response to a particular sports team winning a game. Boom. That's an example of a riot. It doesn't fit my definition of an insurrection. I've differentiated the two, and unless you're going to give me any countervailing definitions, I automatically satisfy that element of my
but I already
claim.
did. Or
and then
interfering with the course of a government proceeding in and of itself. I think that the necessity of rioting in and of itself. What if you blockade a federal highway?
wait, the necessity of rioting in and of itself. Wait, what? No,
I
no,
think-
hold on,
yeah,
wait.
no, I
To
think
be
that-
clear,
that
I just
rioting-
do you
rioting
acknowledge
itself,
do you
you're
acknowledge
breaking
that I
crimes
just
by
gave
rioting.
you? Do you acknowledge that I just gave you an example of a riot that wouldn't be an insurrection under my definitions?
So I think that that would even be appropriate. I think that you could give me tons of definitions of riots that would not fit this definition of an insurrection.
Okay.
But that would not mean that this definition doesn't fit the definition of riot better than insurrection. You understand?
Wait, so if somebody was protesting and it got really violent after a sports game, how would my definition fit that better than insurrection fit that better
What
than
if they were blockading a federal highway? Would that be interfering with the course of government proceedings because there's a federal law that says you can't blockade byways on federal highways? I mean, this is the thing.
I don't
is that
know. I
this
don't
is-
think that
this
counts as
becomes-
like
this
a
becomes
proceeding.
So, do you see what I mean, though? This becomes so broad that we can begin to just add all sorts of things and call them insurrections.
What is the government proceeding?
So, let me give you an example. So if we're going to be totally good faith here, right, which I've been trying to be this entire debate, and I think you would concede that, if we're going to be really good faith here, do you really believe that if a bunch of hippies showed up to smoke a bunch of dope on federal property, okay, and a few of them got wild and started a fire and kicked some shit, right, and I don't know, somebody got beat up with a bat because there was tens of thousands of them who showed up for that protest. Do you really believe that that would fit the criteria of what most people think of, including you, as an insurrection?
If they didn't go there united by like a particular public purpose,
The
if
public
they weren't
purpose
there,
was they were going against this federal law. They don't want the federal law. They're resisting that
just
federal
so that we don't
law.
have to waste any more time on this. If you want to stack this enough, all I'm going to end up doing is saying that, like, yes, this would agree as I would agree that this would be an insurrection. You have it. You're not able to demonstrate. This is why I'm asking you, like, historically, can you give me an example of an event that you don't think I would want to classify as an insurrection?
I don't
that would
think I need
classify
to,
as
because
an
I
insurrection.
think-
But if you're
so
just going to
here's-
give me
so
examples where you're just going to
don't
make,
need
you're going
to.
to build
Well,
these
here, I
events
can
more and
give-
more
I'm
and
gonna
say,
give
well,
you
would
the
that be an
ultimate
insurrection?
example
Also,
right
like,
now.
yeah, I would say that was an insurrection. Sure.
Nobody in good faith anywhere is going to agree with you that if a bunch of hippies showed up to resist the marijuana law on federal property and then a few of them started a riot, that they would consider that insurrection against the United States. I don't believe you believe it. I don't believe your audience believes it. I don't believe anybody believes it. So if that is the case, that it's so broad that that will encapsulate that, I'm actually fine leaving the debate there too.
Okay. I mean, again, it doesn't really matter what we would consider to be an insurrection. The only thing that really matters is what the historical record says at the time was considered an insurrection. And
I don't know,
I literally
because
think
nobody's prosecuting anybody for it. So
you don't have to. Well, you're just retreading. Technically, I think this might be a gish gallows when you keep bringing up arguments that have been rebuked over and over and over again.
I don't
You
think
can
it
keep
was
bringing it
gish
up over and
gallows.
over and over again. But again, we agree that like we can walk in and see, wow, this person was murdered, and go, oh, really? Who was charged with murder? Okay. Or wow, there sure is a riot here. We saw that a riot happened. Well, who was charged with rioting? Well, I guess like you don't need a charge of a particular crime, and the barrier or the bar for charging somebody with a particular crime is probably a lot higher than declaring an event a thing itself. It just doesn't make any sense to say because somebody hasn't been charged with a particular thing, a certain
also
event
doesn't
didn't
make any
exist.
sense to say
We're not
that
talking
just
about criminal
because-
charges.
It also doesn't make any sense that to say that because they haven't been charged with a particular thing, that means they're guilty of the particular thing either.
I'm
That's
not.
the flaw in
That's
that
my
argument. I've pointed it
criteria.
out multiple
My
times.
criteria
Your
is not.
criteria doesn't
you can keep
actually
repeating
flow
something.
with this.
My
correctly.
criteria is not because they weren't charged. That's why it was an insurrection. I've never used that as part of my criteria. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, hippies everywhere don't show up to federal property to protest by smoking weed, and because if a couple of you start a fire, you're going to get brought up on insurrection charges, and nobody ever. That's insane.
We're not. No, I don't know why we keep bringing up insurrection charges. No one is talking about a criminal charge or a criminal proceeding here. That's not.
Yeah,
what's
criminal charge or criminal proceeding. That would be a charge, right?
Yeah,
That's why I'm bringing
nobody's
up criminal
talking about that
charges.
here. Nobody's talking about criminal charges here or criminal proceedings here.
So but you would still consider that an insurrection, right?
An insurrection doesn't have to be a criminal matter.
I just want to make sure that you would still consider that an insurrection.
If all four elements of what I said were met, then yes.
All right, fine. Well, then I'll leave the debate there. I'm good with that.
So what I'll do And so we went 7 rounds here, and I was just timing it and everything else like that. I see that there's obviously a difference of opinion in the definitions, what fits what, etc. So what I'll do is I'll go to closing arguments. I'll put. Are you both okay with 3 minutes on the clock to make your closing argument?
Sure.
Or I can make it a little bit longer if you guys want, and then we can close that after that.
Yeah, whatever you guys want to do, I'm fine with.
Are you okay with 3, or do you want more?
3's probably fine.
3 minutes? Okay. Who wants to go first?
Well, I opened first, so usually the person who opens closes last.
Okay. So, Destiny, I'll turn it to you. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock, and you can put your closing arguments here. And this was a fantastic discussion. Obviously, you have a good debate when the chat is like, if almost 50-50. So I'll go ahead and turn it to you, Destiny, and you can give us your closing arguments, and then I'll go turn it to Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, historically, like there have been examples of things that were considered insurrections that were incredibly small in nature, right? I don't know if anybody died at all in the Whiskey Rebellion. I'm pretty sure everybody that got arrested for that was like acquitted. It was just people basically essentially protesting the whiskey tax laws. This wasn't a massive deal that had like explosions and gunfire and deaths everywhere. I think that we just don't tend to view things as insurrections as much anymore because we don't tend to have insurrections as much anymore because that's kind of become the new norm as the United States has, traveled through or journeyed through time. I think that the 4 elements that I gave, I think were pretty clearly met on January 6th. I think I've demonstrated that we can imagine a ton of events that are riots that wouldn't fit the 4 elements. I understand that Andrew has a really hard time understanding the difference between resisting a law versus just breaking a law. Just because somebody goes out and they engage in rioting doesn't mean that they are trying to resist the law of rioting, that they're trying to make it so that rioting is legal, that that's the goal of that particular riot. Oftentimes, riots can be said to come together to protest other types of things where people feel like the law isn't being executed in a reasonable manner. To say that a bunch of people that show up and end up rioting as a result of a protest that's against, like, say, a cop they feel like wasn't fairly prosecuted is the same as a bunch of people showing up to resist the certification of the vote as laid out in the Electoral Count Act is just not at all the same thing. But we can continue to misread the second element of this, and I understand why, and that's because if you grant the definition or any definition of insurrection, January 6th almost certainly follows from it, and the only way to escape January 6th as being labeled as an insurrection is to use either a ridiculous type of definition that literally nobody historically has ever agreed to, and again, you will never find historical citations of people that use these very unique and contrived definitions of insurrection, or you set the bar of evidence as being unbelievably high, which is saying something like Donald Trump needed to say, hey, everybody, we're going to go do an insurrection, and absent that, even if he's telling people to fight like hell, even if he's tweeting the day before, Vice President Pence has the ability to overturn the election, even if he's saying, like, we need to go down in March and fight like hell and take our country back. None of these things are going to matter if they don't actually use the word insurrection, which I guess means there's no such thing as an insurrection ever having occurred in all of U.S. history. I would say that if you argue with somebody who doesn't believe in a particular definition of insurrection, ask them, has any insurrection ever occurred ever? Which would you consider an insurrection? And then once they start to consider something as an insurrection, say, hey, well, what are the elements that make this an insurrection? Or even more, you could say, historically, what have judges and lawmakers considered an insurrection? People like Andrew will never do that. Instead, they will just play word games all day and try to say, well, riots fit, and what about states, and all these other things that aren't really relevant to defining an insurrection, which, however you define it, January 6th clearly was.
All right. Okay. That was 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I will turn it to you, Andrew, to make your closing arguments. And then, Andrew, from what I understand, you wanted to open up the phone lines, right, and have a discussion with the people after?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Even if Destiny has other places to go, I'm willing to stick around for call-ins. I've always done that on the Crucible.
Sure.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's people.
Right now, as we speak, Bills is firing up the phone line, so we'll get that phone number out and put it on the screen, and you guys can, Destiny, if you want to stay, you can telegraph it to your audience, and we can answer some questions for the people. But I will turn it to you, Andrew, to make your closing arguments.
Yeah, well, it's really funny, this appeal to authority. Destiny grabs this entire nebulous definition from some guy that he respects on the internet and then claims that this is some authoritative definition. This is the authoritative definition because I read it from some guy on the internet. Oh, okay, great. Even though the courts themselves have not ruled on this, and nobody was charged with insurrection. Nobody was charged. Again, one more time, nobody charged with insurrection. Trump acquitted of inciting an insurrection, which again, nobody was charged with. Talk about nebulous definition. He says, I'm playing word games. Meanwhile, he takes time today, all day, to assemble a 4-point, kind of, this is my definition, completely based on some other guy on the internet, which is crazy to me, right? This is Destiny's personal definition of what this means. And it clearly fits 3 of the criteria for rioting right off the gate. We only had an issue with 2. And then when we apply these, and remember my opening statement, I said in my opening statement, this is going to become very broad, right? There's no way that we're not going to be able to call all sorts of things insurrections that clearly are not insurrections. We come up with the idea of what if a bunch of dope smoking hippies all show up with the united purpose of smoking dope on federal land in order to resist the federal law. And then a couple of them start a fire and one gets beaten up with a baseball bat or something like this. Suddenly that's an insurrection. Clearly, nobody would think that that was an insurrection. Clearly, nobody would think that that's a completely unreasonable standard, right? But it's the Destiny standard. And the reason, again, that he had to have such a broad definition, the reason that he needed this, and he needed me to come in and give him some definition he could do an internal critique on, is because his idea that this was an insurrection is only there specifically to villainize the opposition for the purposes of demonization, so that when bad things happen to them, he can call them traitors. That's it. That's the whole game. It's been his whole game now for a while. And this is what got him on Pierce and all these other things, which I recently reviewed, was that take. And so in order for him to justify that take, he has to make you a traitor because you don't believe that that was an insurrection that nobody was charged with.
Okay. 2:15. Guys, that was fucking fantastic discussion. Obviously people are going to have different viewpoints on where they go, but that's, I think, the beauty of any discussion like this in debate, that it, good debate always has people with different viewpoints saying like, oh, I think this guy did better. I think this guy did better. So great discussion from both. I am going to open up the phone lines right now. I think the number is going to be Block Talk, Bills.
Yeah.
So guys, the number is going to be 515-605-9740.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah, I still remember. Yeah. But yeah, so that is going to be the phone number, guys, to call into the show. You can interact with us, whether it's me, Destiny, or
To start
Andrew.
your show now, press 1 to hear.
Your show is scheduled to start in 33 seconds.
And you just and Andrew, how do you normally run this? 515-605-9740. That's the number to call in, guys. Again, that number.
Just usually just whoever calls in, they have a single question, you answer the question, and then move on to the next caller. Maybe like a 30-second, very quick back and forth, so you can get to as many callers as possible.
Yeah.
Usually that's how I do it.
Okay, no, that's cool because we're gonna.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Okay, so guys, the number to call in is 515-605-9740. Again, that number is 515-605-9740. We're manning the phone lines here at Fresh and Fit. So if you call in, if you super chat, we'll go ahead and put you at the top of the list, get you in there faster. As usual, super chat with the last 4 digits of your number. And I think we just opened up the lines. Okay, so do we have anyone on now? I know we literally just opened them, but.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so as usual, guys, normal rules. If you want to skip the line, super chat the last 4 digits of your numbers in, and we will go ahead and get you on the line. Let's go ahead and hit the first caller here.
We got 6327. You're up. 6327. You're up.
Go ahead, 6327. And I'm going to be hosting a Zoom call after this, guys. Andrew, if you don't mind, drop it in on Castle Club after this.
Of course.
Awesome.
At your service. Thank you so much for hosting this, and you guys coming in on your day off is very
You're
kind to
welcome
people.
to if you want to jump in and talk to my. Well,
Hey, you guys ready for me?
But yeah, go ahead. But we'll do calls for a bit, and then we'll switch on over to Castle Club. And I appreciate you guys doing that for me. If you guys want to, thank you, Andrew. And if you want to come in, Destiny, awesome. We got someone on the line, right?
Yeah.
Okay, brother. Tell us your name, where you're from, and hit us with your question.
My name's Rick from Miami, Florida. The question is for Andrew. Very frustrating on his side to see the debate on his side. So I really do need an answer of what his definition is for an insurrection.
Are you asking me my definition?
Andrew's.
I'm not going to give you one. It's not my burden.
I feel like that's a cop-out. Okay, so that's
No,
all.
well, then you need to learn how to debate, because you not knowing how to debate doesn't mean that I'm copping out. It's not my position. The affirmative position, the person calling people insurrectionists, is not me.
Wait, how are we supposed to have a debate on if January 6th was an insurrection if you don't even have a definition of insurrection?
Why do I need to have a definition to note that whatever definition that you could come up with would be too broad to apply to this? That's not a logical statement either, Destiny.
No, what?
Yeah, hold on one second.
Wait, hold on.
He came in with some facts. He came in with some points, but you didn't.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to respond to him on that, or
I think we missed like 30.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We were having an exchange. I missed the actual question.
No, I think his main criticism is he wants to know what your definition of insurrection is. Is that correct, caller?
Correct.
Yeah, it's not my burden.
Point
so.
on his definition of an insurrection.
It's not my burden.
Which way to not answer that kind of a definition of question, and he's using the words "it's not my burden" to cop out of that definition question.
Okay, why? How is it my burden?
Feels an insurrection.
So let me ask you a question, caller. Okay, let's assume for a second I didn't know what murder was, and you were trying to give me the criteria for what murder was. Could I logically give you a criticism for why that actually would fit something else that I do know what it is better than the idea of murder? Do you understand that, caller?
Yes.
Well, then what is your criticism?
I think what you're asking me is if something that you think fits another definition, would you be able to apply to that definition? And you could.
No, that's not what I'm asking you.
Not providing an actual argument to that. Like, all you're saying is, well, this could fit something else. But you're not saying...
No, I'm giving what's called an internal critique. An internal critique doesn't necessitate an argument.
Hold on, this doesn't make sense.
You can give an internal criticism.
If the debate has to do with whether or not a person was murdered, if that's the debate, was John murdered, and the entire debate is just you critiquing another person's definition of murder, but you're unwilling to put forth your own definition of murder, the implication is that you were never prepared to debate the actual topic of the debate, which is if somebody was
That's not the
murdered.
implication. That doesn't even make any sense. So, Destiny, let me ask you a counter question.
My argument is that is arguing in bad faith.
Okay,
that's not only is that not arguing in bad faith, it's arguing in the best faith.
No, okay, wait.
Destiny knew for sure that he had the burden, not me.
That's Destiny's thing. Next call. Let's get the next call.
Oh, no, wait, real quick. Hold on, because this has to be answered. Hold on. How could you possibly deal with the topic if you don't have a definition of insurrection?
Well, let's try. I was just getting to that. So let me ask you, Destiny. Let us assume for a second that you weren't sure exactly what murder meant. You weren't exactly sure what the criteria was. Another person was calling this group of people a murderer, right? You had kind of an idea maybe of what that was. And so you went to them and you said, okay, can you tell me what you mean by murder? And they gave you some other criteria that fit way better with something other than their definition of murder. Why would that be illogical or in any way unreasonable?
That's not illogical and that's not unreasonable, but that would only mean that you would be successful if the debate is Destiny's definition of insurrection satisfactory insofar as defining January 6th as an insurrection? But that wasn't the debate topic. It wasn't just my definition of insurrection.
Yeah,
the debate was okay, wait. So how can do you agree that the prompt of the debate was January 6th an insurrection?
Yeah, why does that mean that
How can you answer that? Wait, do you not have to answer
Yes.
the prompt to a debate?
Yeah, so I'm not taking that. I'm neutral on it. It could have been. I was willing to.
Oh, you have no
that-
position?
I was willing to concede that it could have been. I said right in my opening, in good faith, I'll make concessions based under A, B, and C criteria if he can make these demonstrations. You never did.
Okay, so then just to be clear then, just so we're all, so the prompt for the debate was January 6th an insurrection? And I came in with a positive and you came in with no position.
No, it wasn't no position. It was that it's possible that it was. It's possible that it wasn't.
That's no position.
And I was willing to hear you. No, it's a neutral position. That's not no position.
That's no
neutral
position.
Is a
If somebody's
position.
looking, okay.
I'm sorry, is neutral not a position?
Not really, no.
Oh, no, not really. Does that mean no or yes, Destiny? Is neutral a position or isn't it?
For the purposes of having a debate, no.
Oh, for the purposes of having a debate, you can't have a neutral position. Destiny,
somebody hosted
Stephen
a debate-
Bonnell III, the
Yep.
best leftist debater on planet
Yep.
Earth, ladies and gentlemen, neutral on a debate topic
Yep.
is not a position.
Not to have as a debater. That's correct. If there's a debate saying, is God real? And one person shows up and say, I'm arguing the affirmative. God is real. And the other person says, I'm a neutral position on that. Yeah,
Oh, I
he
guess
could be
you've
or couldn't
never.
be.
I guess you've never debated with an agnostic before who's neutral. They're
Not in
neutral
a
on it?
debate on what that would be a debate on agnosticism or Gnosticism,
No, it
not a
wouldn't.
debate
It could
on
be a
whether or not
debate on
God
if
is
God
real
is
or
real.
not real.
Why couldn't you go into a debate agnostic about God being real or not real, Destiny? Can you explain that real quick?
Because
I'd love to hear it.
definitionally, an agnostic doesn't take a position on or doesn't think they can have knowledge of the
They do
existence
take a
of
position.
God.
They take a
They don't
neutral
have a knowledge
position.
of God. So why would you debate a Gnostic person or somebody, an
That
agnostic
makes-
person, or
that
somebody
makes
on
no
Gnosticism who doesn't have a position on the existence
Oh,
of God exists or
so
not?
agnostics can't have a neutral position about whether or not God exists or not.
You wouldn't
according
listen to a
Stephen
debate
Bonnell
somebody,
III.
a person who's agnostic, you wouldn't listen to the debate on whether or not God is real or not. They would say, oh, well, I can't have information about the existence of God. And you go, okay, well, I guess you wouldn't have this
Oh,
debate.
well, then I guess 50% of the debates on modern day debate are incorrect because people have a neutral position, an agnostic position, like Matt Dillahunty, a guy you talked to about whether or not God is real, where Matt Dillahunty says, listen, I'm agnostic on it. He could be real. You just haven't demonstrated to me that he's real. Matt Dillahunty's wrong in all of those debates, right, Destiny?
He would be if that was the prompt of the debate. Yeah, so the prompt of the debate was, is God real or not real?
I'm
And you
doing the
come in and you
triangle.
go,
I'm
oh,
doing the triangle.
You come in and you go, oh, well, I'm agnostic. Then you'd go, okay, well, why the fuck are you in this debate? You don't have a position on it. Then bring in somebody that feels an atheist who wants to have a strong position of like he's not real, and then a theist who has a strong position he is real.
That makes no sense. You can still
Okay.
have a neutral position. That's absurd. I don't know. How in the world are you the world's best leftist debater if you don't know you can take a neutral position?
This is like saying you want to have a debate between two people between who is God or what is God, and one person is Catholic and the other person is an atheist. It's a nonsense position. Everybody knows this. This is like a debate game.
Oh,
right
everybody
now.
knows it,
This
so
is a
it's
debate
true.
game. Yeah.
Just like everybody knows it's an insurrection, even though they can't charge
I didn't
anybody
say
with an
everybody knows
insurrection.
it's an insurrection.
Right?
I said the historical record says it's an insurrection, but
Okay. So what I'll do here is we'll move to the next caller here.
go for it.
Let's Mo, you got it up?
5584, you're up. 5584, you're up.
All right. Welcome to the show, 5584. You got Myron Gaines, Destiny, and Andrew Wilson in the house. Hit us with your question, please, quickly, because we got a lot of people on the line. Holy shit.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, bro. You're on air.
70.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, man. You're on there.
Oh, hello. Well, damn. Well, never. So, I just wanted to ask, do I have to solely debate on this topic alone, or can I just talk about other topics as well?
You want to keep a topic
yeah, just
specific,
on this
please.
alone, yeah, because otherwise people are going to be calling up for every damn.
Yeah.
This is hoping. I mean, neither of them actually gave a definition. Neither of them gave a definition on the topic at all. Like, Destiny, what was your definition of insurrection?
An insurrection has four crucial elements. One is that there's an assembly of people for a common purpose. Two is that you're resisting a particular law or you're interfering with the course of government proceeding. Three is that you're doing this by way of force or intimidation. And then four is you're doing it for a public purpose, not like a private one. You're not showing up to like steal something, or you're not showing up because you're like upset about like how a sporting event turned out. There's like a public interest in it.
Damn.
Yeah,
And I
caller,
agree
he
with
said
you,
that at the top of his argument, bro. Caller, he said that at the top of his argument, dude, and he was referencing the 14th Amendment. You might have missed it.
No, I'm just saying. No, I agree with him that it wasn't insurrection, but wasn't Andrew's whole point that January 6th was not an insurrection? I believe that was his whole point.
Well, Andrew doesn't have a point because he rejects my definition of insurrection, and then he appeals to some universal definition of riot, which I'm not even sure he's given. And then he appeals to, well, this is what everybody would think a riot is. And then he appeals to, well, nobody would agree that hippie people engaged in your definition of insurrection are committing an insurrection. So I guess Andrew's just agnostic on the question of whether or not J6 was an insurrection because he doesn't have a definition of what an insurrection is.
Okay, but I think you answered his question, Destiny, so we can move on to the next guy.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Thank you for calling in. We're going to move on to the next caller. Again, guys, 515-605-9740. Shout out to Mo and Bills manning the phone lines in the back. If you super chat in the last four digits of your number, fnfsuperchat.com, we will go ahead and rumble, right? Whatever you want to do. We're live on all the platforms. We will get you to the top of the list. Last four digits of your number. Who's up next?
4086, you're up. 4086.
Go ahead, 4086. Shout out to the production team in the back, man, making this fucking flawless. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, so I got a question for Andrew. Just it's not. I'm not trying to debate on it. It's just a question. I'm just trying to gauge what you think about this. So, Andrew, if there was like a leader or whatever per se of the country or whatever, right? Like, and you genuinely wholeheartedly believe that this leader was like an evil person or whatever, and they're gonna bring rain and terror to your country or whatever, do you think it's morally justified to take him out before he causes some harm?
That's really context specific. So I'm possibly possibly.
If you believe that this leader is like the next Hitler or whatever, you generally thought that. Do you think it's like okay to like kind of take over or like
It's again that claim is it's really listen. That claim is really context specific. I'm going to tell you it's possible, yes, but I'm not sure because it would be under some type of, again, it's like a nebulous concept, the context behind this. So I'm not sure. Maybe it could be. There's a possibility, but that doesn't mean yes or no. I'm not sure. I would need context for this.
Okay, so I mean, just take the Trump shooting for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. So I mean, like, suppose that guy that did it or whatever legitimately thought that like Trump was going to be the next Hitler. Do you think he was in the like almost a moral right or whatever to try to take him out?
No.
Okay. Why?
Well, so we're not allowed to, in this nation, assassinate our political opposition. And if you want to know why that would be immoral, it's because that would be murder. But if you want to know why that would be illegal, it's because there's a crime against, killing people. That's why it would be illegal. It's a crime. You can't kill people.
Okay, so that's fine. So let's just take.
Just
away
to be
murder.
clear, I don't think assassinations are allowed in any country. I think they're usually not okay. But
Okay, hold on. I just want to add. Do you think it's okay to just stop them? Just stop them from taking office, like just physically force and prevent them from taking office.
I mean, I'm trying to follow this. Maybe it could be, but what do you mean? You mean, is it okay to physically stop Trump from taking office?
If a bunch of people pulled up and just like forcibly, physically, we're not going to allow you to be president because we think you're going to be awful. Do you think it's okay to do that?
Yeah, that would be criminal. Yeah, you can't do that. No.
Okay.
All right.
That's it. Thank you.
No problem, man. We'll move on to the next caller. Again, 515-605-9740. Super chat, last 4 digits of your number to cut the line. Go ahead, Mo.
3990. You're up.
Go ahead, 3990.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Andrew, I have a question. Can you define me a chair?
Do you want? Well, it depends on. This is like the sandwich argument, right? So, what is a sandwich? What is a chair? This kind of thing. So, when you look at the essence of a thing, right? It is possible that all definitions could fall short to an essence of a thing, but that doesn't mean we can't recognize the essence of a thing. Which is why, if we were to take the idea of, a bunch of hippies smoking a fucking blunt in a forest somewhere to resist federal law, and then they started burning the forest down because a couple of them got too rowdy, calling that an insurrection wouldn't fit the spirit of what that means. So while you're looking at both the definition, you're also looking at the application. So when you ask, can I define a chair? Sure. Can I give you a definition of a chair which you can't pick apart? Likely not.
But isn't that what you're doing right now?
No, it's not what I'm doing right now. Because there's still an essence to the thing. There's still something which we're perceiving to the thing, which makes it a chair. The same way it makes it an insurrection. So if it fits the criterion of a riot better, and when we see it as a riot, and everybody sees it as a riot more than they do an insurrection, which is why it was charged that way, it seems like it falls under riot better.
who's charged for a riot?
Well, they're charged under the purview of rioting.
I thought they were charged for like trespassing and stuff.
Yeah, well, trespassing as well. So these
That's
are
not a
these
riot, though.
Well, these are going to be tangential laws.
What is a tangential law? What does that mean?
So if let's say for a second that you're arrested for for trespassing, right? Certainly that's not going to fit the definition of an insurrection, right?
Is there is there a federal crime? Is there a federal crime for rioting?
Well, maybe not, but it would be under purview of what rioting is.
I don't know what that means. Purview of what rioting is when we talk about criminal charges. I don't know what that means.
Okay, well, you agree with me there is rioting.
I don't know if rioting is a public or is a federal crime. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I get that. But do you agree with me there is rioting?
I agree that riots exist. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you agree that you and I could likely agree on what a riot is?
I don't know. You don't want to give definitions for anything.
Well, I mean, if I gave you examples, do you think we could agree? Like, if I showed BLM footage of their riots, do you think that you would agree that those were riots?
No, I would ask you very specifically, was anybody charged with a riot? And if they weren't, then I would say that by your earlier definitions of insurrection, these must not have been riots.
You mean
you can show me somebody charged with a crime of rioting.
What definitions did I give you of insurrection?
You made it sound like a necessary element of an insurrection having occurred was an individual being charged with a crime of insurrection. You repeated this like 20 times.
That never happened.
Then why did you bring that up over and over and over again?
Because, well, no. So you're conflating two different ideas. So idea one is nobody was charged with an insurrection, which means the powers that be also, when they saw this under their purview, probably didn't think that it fit the criteria for whatever an insurrection is going to be. And so that's We have to untangle this idea. And then we move on to idea 2, which is your definition may fit something else better than it fits actual insurrection.
Okay. Then you'd have to show me for a particular BLM riot that somebody was charged with the crime of rioting. And if they weren't charged with that and they were charged with something else, I'd say, oh, people probably didn't think there was a riot. They just felt like a couple people.
For me, how this was actually an insurrection.
I already hit. I laid out 4 necessary elements, that things that wouldn't encompass a riot. And
well, I would say that Chaz and Chop was like open rebellion or insurrection.
Okay. And then I would ask you, no, because I would ask you for a single historical example, either judicially, legally, or through any kind of like historical writing, where they say that you can engage in an insurrection against a state. I'm not aware of that being possible. I don't think insurrections are defined for states. But if you can show me an example, then I say, oh, okay, fine. Then Chaz was an insurrection.
Yeah, okay, but the definition itself, right? If I were to define it that way, right, as like Chaz Chop, and I'm not, right? But I'm saying I can at least look at that and say, this is something akin to this, of what I would expect to see under the criteria of X, Y, and Z. That's my point.
Maybe, but you never gave me a definition for insurrection, so I'm not sure.
I mean, it's a good thing that Andrew doesn't think there are no riots during the BLM protest because no one got convicted. So that's a good takeaway, I guess. But thank you, guys. That's it.
All right, so we'll move to the next caller. So, guys, I'll just discuss with my team how we'll do it. We'll answer a few more phone calls here. And then what I'll do is we'll stay live on YouTube and all the other platforms. As you guys know, obviously, go check out Destiny. Go check out Andrew Wilson on their respective YouTube channels. They're streaming as well. This is, a multi-stream between all the different platforms. I think between all of us, guys, we got like 50,000 plus, around 30 to 50,000 watching us. And what I'll do is I'll send a Zoom link to all the Castle Club members, and we'll answer questions exclusively with the Castle Club members. And I appreciate you guys doing that for me. But we'll answer a few more phone calls for guys that are just watching the show regularly. But we'll stay on, but we'll answer questions from Castle Club members only. But we'll do that in a bit after we answer some more here. Who's next on the line? We'll try to get through as many of you guys on.
Good. 1143, you are up. 1143, you are up.
And before we bring him on, Destiny, Andrew, do you guys want it where he just asks the question, then we just move on, then take him off the line, you answer the question, and go on so we get more people through? You guys
however you want to do it, bro.
Okay, because I know you normally do this on your things. So
that would be better, is have the caller say what they say and then disconnect them. Otherwise, it's like a back and forth that could last forever. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that then. So, caller, go ahead, say your name, where you're from, ask your question, and then we'll, have them respond to your question and move on. Get as many people through.
1143, go ahead.
Go ahead, brother.
All right, I'll remain unnamed, but I just want to point out that the particular government proceedings that BLM as a movement was interfering with were the various court cases related to police brutality.
Okay,
in
so
that
that's
case,
more of a comment.
BLM meet the criteria of an insurrection?
You wouldn't. I wouldn't define like an entirety of a summer of protests or riots or insurrections as like a particular insurrection. Also, I don't think that I'll ignore the federal state distinction for now. What?
One entity.
Sure, but if we look
consistently as BLM through the whole summer.
Do what? Say that again.
And they profess themselves in favor of a certain type of outcome in various court cases relating to police brutality, and demanded forcefully with intimidation that the government bend to what they wanted the outcome to be. How does this not make BLM an insurrection?
It's if you can, you might there. My guess is going to be that if we went through every single BLM riot, that we could probably find some that I would say might meet my definition. If we ignore the state-federal distinction, we might find some that meet my definition of insurrection.
And that Trump is a bad president because he led an insurrection. Then Kamala Harris directly provided aid and support to insurrectionists. So wouldn't this also make Kamala Harris an insurrectionist?
No, because I don't think any court has reviewed any of that behavior and found any of it to be an insurrection, number one. And number two, I don't believe that providing bail money is considered part of aiding and abetting.
Whoa. No court has said that this is an insurrection either.
That's not true. The Colorado State Supreme Court did.
Why wasn't anybody charged then, Destiny, with insurrection?
Because it wasn't reviewing, because the court wasn't reviewing it for a criminal proceeding. It was the Colorado State Supreme Court. They don't have the authority or jurisdiction to hear
and what has the Supreme Court said?
The Supreme Court said that they didn't really want to deal with it, so they basically axed it.
Right. So you were just operating off of your definition. Under your definition, he's meeting the criteria for these being insurrections because he's saying that this is now federal, that these are impeding and resisting federal laws at this point. And so if that is the case, you would have to concede
the federal laws. That's just, you haven't demonstrated that. The federal execution of what law?
Well, wait a second. Weren't they resisting the federal laws of how police are able to deal with suspects and things like this?
Were they? Were
that
they
what
saying,
police reform was?
Was a federal law? That's not, none of that is federal. But I don't think you understand.
I mean, that's what the caller's saying, though.
No, it sounded like he was saying they were protesting particular court outcomes. That's the judicial system, not the legislative system. So I understand that government is confusing, but these are two totally different things. I don't know if you can have an insurrection protesting court decisions. I'm not aware of that ever being the case. If you can engage in insurrection or rebellion against a court decision, I'm not aware of that.
All right. We will go on to the next caller. Who's up next? And we'll take a few more of these guys. Then I'm going to drop a link in Castle Club for Castle Club members to come in and ask these questions.
7579, you are up. 7579, you are up.
Go ahead, brother.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Y'all hear me?
Got you.
Hey, I got a question for Destiny, and I think Andrew can pick up afterwards. So based off of your 4 points that you gave for what would make an insurrection, technically none of your points make it necessary for there to be violence. You say in point 3, force or intimidation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. So based off of that, wouldn't any legal protest where you're advocating for a certain political cause or anything like that in a public space, wouldn't that also, by your definition, count as an insurrection?
No, because I think that the intimidation part is important. The quote that I borrowed from here was from Justice Marshall in 1807. He said, quote, "The most comprehensive definition of levying war against the king or against the United States, which I have seen, requires an assemblage of men ready to act and with an intent to do some treasonable act and armed in warlike manner, or else assembled in such numbers as to supersede the necessity of arms." So I don't think you necessarily have to engage in violence, but I think that having the people there with the purpose of like intimidation and being ready to act with violence, I think is easily enough to satisfy element
No
3.
justice, no justice, no peace.
You would have to point to you would have to point to a particular thing that what is the
I'll point to Chaz Chop. So do you think that if you were to take over a big portion or even a small, tiny portion of a state and consider it to now be neutral from the United States itself, that becomes a federal matter?
I don't know. Is that was it considered a federal matter?
Well, don't you think that is resisting federal law? If you make the claim we are seceding this area from the United States, how would that not be federal?
Were they seceding it from the United States, or were they seceding it, or were they seceding it from Washington or whatever?
What?
Were they seceding from the United States of America, or were they seceding from like the state or the city?
They said that this is a
so they no
neutral
longer
zone,
accepted USD. They no longer employed or recognized like interstate travel.
Even if you
or
were to have a secession, that would mean you couldn't accept USD anymore.
Okay, I don't know enough.
Why would that matter?
Because it seems like if you're going to secede from a country, it feels like part of that would be like establishing your own government, establishing your own like foreign relations and ambassadors.
You can still have USD, and they did. They were trying to do that. They had their own armed militant group who was there armed, definitely intimidating, refused to allow people to come in and out of the zone. They were trying to start their own economy, their own gardens. They had annexed the buildings which were around them. That definitely seems like they're resisting federal law. You're not allowed to secede in the United States. That's a big no-no.
I don't remember this being. Can you tell me what statements or what they made? I don't know the details of this. What did they make, or what statements did they make about federal secession?
Yeah, so Chaz Chop, they considered it the neutral zone. There was multiple statements made that this is no longer part of the United States.
By who?
We're taking this over, just by the people who were there.
By the people. So if a random person says a particular thing, because I thought you said earlier that we couldn't read intent into the Donald Trump crowd. You said earlier that we couldn't read intent into the Donald Trump crowd, despite the fact that people were hanging signs saying 7076, hang Mike Pence, and the statements that Trump had made. But I can ascertain.
Yeah, but you say such an inference is fine. So
I didn't. I said the inference is fine because of the collection of statements that Donald Trump had made, collecting the people there for a given purpose that they actually managed to succeed in doing. It makes perfect sense. I can lay it out from start to finish if you want.
Me before I can make the point doesn't help your point. No, it actually doesn't make any sense. Because your claim is that you can read into the hearts and minds of these people based on what you perceive their actions to be. It's like, okay, fair enough. So if the people who are there are doing the exact same thing, they're saying, okay, this is now a neutral zone. We're seceding from the United States of America. Why can't we read that into their actions as well, Destiny?
I would absolutely do that if but I don't know of any statement like that. And you can't name a single one, so I don't know what I'm supposed to go. I don't know what I can work off of.
If there was such a statement, let's just assume that there was for a second, would you then consider that to be an insurrection?
If they said that we are going to secede from the United States of America and they had like some organized violent wave and all the other elements were met, then I'd say, yeah, this would count as an insurrection.
Okay.
Easy, sure, easily, of course.
Gotcha.
But you wouldn't say the same for January 6th, so because you haven't even given a definition of insurrection, but that's the difference between good faith and bad faith, by the way.
No, that's not bad faith for me to do an internal critique in your definition when I can at least take your definition and say, wait a second, all of these apply to a different category.
Yeah, but
and that was established very well.
You're critiquing my definition without even having a definition of your own.
I don't need to have a definition to critique yours. That's absurd. That's illogical and absurd.
The debate, stop using illogical. It doesn't mean anything. You're abusing the word, okay? The debate was whether or not, the debate was over whether or not January 6th was an insurrection. If you only came to that debate to critique my position, and I shouldn't even let you get away with this. You said earlier that you were neutral on it. You're not neutral on it. The answer for you is you can't compute the question. It's undefined. You don't have a neutral position. If you don't have a definition of insurrection, you can't possibly take a position. It's like dividing by zero. The answer is not neutral or nothing. You just have an undefined position on it because you don't even have a definition of a term.
Yeah, I know you hate this.
That is true. I don't like arguing with the person that doesn't know.
That's actually an illogical statement to say that I would need to have a definition of anything to critique your definition of it if I have something else that I can make a comparison to that fits with better, that you agree it fits better in.
Okay, can I ask
why you don't get that.
Okay, what would your position be on, if I were to ask you, is January 6th...
What the fuck?
What's your answer to that? Is January 6th...
Did you just go...
I'm asking you, was January 6th a... What's your answer to that? Would you say you're neutral on that?
Well, that would be incoherent. I wouldn't even understand what you're saying.
Thank you. I agree. Yes. Insurrection, that term is incoherent to you because you have no definition for the word. So I'm uttering nothing to you. When I say insurrection, you have no way to compute the question, so you can't say that you're neutral on it. The same way you can't say you're neutral on it being you can't say that you're neutral on it being an insurrection because you have no definition for insurrection.
I don't know how language works then when you say,
apparently not.
This is a Snicker bar. And I don't know what a Snicker bar is, but I can't make comparisons to other things so that I can at least understand where you're coming from with what a Snicker bar is. Okay, Destiny.
That's correct. That is correct.
Yeah,
what if I showed you a bar and you're like, that's not a Snicker bar. That looks like a chocolate wafery thing with caramel on it. That's a Snicker bar.
And
you go, no,
great how that works?
This fits way better with a Milky Way. That's actually way more like a Milky Way. No, it's not quite a Milky Way. It's a Snicker bar. And you're like, well, I don't even have a definition.
Then it would fit that criteria of a Snickers bar, the ontology of a Snickers bar,
better
than the ontology of a Milky Way.
You don't have that ontology is not existent for you because it's undefined. You have no definition of what a Snickers bar even is.
You don't need to have a definition for you to understand an ontology of a new concept. What are you talking about?
You can't argue.
That's crazy.
We're arguing over whether a thing is a thing, whether A is B, and for you, B is undefined. So you can't even be agnostic on the question. You can't compute it. It's gibberish to you, like when I utter gibberish.
No, this is gibberish to me. This makes no sense. Why? There's absolutely no reason why, if you've never, even if you were to grant, I'd never even heard the term insurrection before, that I couldn't understand if you came up with a term for insurrection. I said, well, fit this other criteria better, why it is that you couldn't concede that was true. That's this absurd logic. And yes, Destiny, is illogical.
Okay, we can move to the next caller. I'll take a few more of these that we're going to... Council Club, guys, I'm going to send you guys a link on Council Club where you can join in and be the people that ask these guys the questions. And it'll be and don't worry, we won't have your face on camera because we're streaming on all the platforms. So we're going to protect your identity. If you want to be on camera, maybe we'll do that. But in general, you will just have your voice play. Who's up next?
And whoever is 7983, I see you donated, but you're not in the phone line. So...
Okay, 7893, get in there. Who's up next behind him?
1753, you're up.
1753, you're on the air with Destiny, Myron, and Andrew. Go ahead.
1753.
There you go. What's up, brother?
Yes, sir. Hello. How are you guys doing?
Good, man. What's your question for the panel?
Quick question. It's tangentially related, but Andrew, why do you think Trump didn't call anybody during the riot? Like there were 3 hours. Cops had their shit kicked out of them. He didn't call anybody except for, well, his lawyer and stuff. But like Nancy Pelosi, that's usually the defense. She was the high queen of all Capitol security. Why didn't Trump call Nancy Pelosi?
It's not within. This is not within the purview of the. This is not within the purview of the debate. I don't care about your diatribe. I don't care about your emotional state. This is not within the purview of the debate.
All right. Next up, 8438. You are up. 8438. You are up.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, brother.
I appreciate you having me. I have a quick question for Destiny. It sounded like at the end of the debate, toward the end, he conceded to Andrew's example of the hippie rebellion and hippie insurrection. If that's the case, then wouldn't you also have to say that the inauguration for Trump in 2017, the overturning of Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court, and the I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nobody said anything?
Yeah, we're just listening, caller.
Yeah, just listening to you, bro. Go ahead.
Wouldn't you have to say that those two events, and then, of course, you have the White House bombing after the George Floyd death with Trump and everything, wouldn't you have to say that those would fall within the same definition as well?
I would have to go through the facts of each of these, but if you can show me that there was an assembly of people that united for a common purpose, that they were there to contravene some type of federal law, that the resistance's goal was to make use of force or intimidation, and that they were there for something that was like in the public interest, then whatever you're going to give me here, I'm going to say, well, yeah, if it's my definition of insurrection, then I would say these were probably insurrections. Sure.
All right, thanks.
Also, wait, hold on. Real quick. Not only would I say that, you should say that too. Let's say, for instance, let's say that when Roe v. Wade changed or whatever, let's say the federal government was going to do a particular thing. They were gathering to, let's just say they were doing a ban on it. Let's say that you had, let's say that Kamala Harris was marching with these people, chanting and cheering them on and saying like, we're going to stop the government from banning abortion, okay? They're going to sign this law today. We're not going to let them do it. We're going to make our voice here. We're going to go and fight like hell. We're going to do what we need to do to make them not pass this law. They show up when it's going to be signed. She's outside cheering them on as they break into the Capitol building. They go in. When we talk about whether an insurrection is occurring or not, right, and we talk about the 14th Amendment, you shouldn't want her to be president again. You should say, hey, you took an oath to the Constitution, and now you're engaging in insurrectionist behavior. You're violating your oath to the Constitution. I don't want you running for office again. We should all think that. I would think that. All of us should have that feeling, that if somebody has engaged in or aided in helping people engage in insurrection, then you shouldn't want this person who was in office to run for office again, I would say.
All right, we'll move on to the next caller. And guys, just so you know, we're going to drop the Castle Club link, the Zoom call link in Castle Club right now. So get in there and then raise your hand in the Zoom call, and we'll answer one or two more calls, and we'll go over to the Castle Club guys only. But we're going to drop the link right now. Castle Club guys, go ahead and join CastleClub.tv. You know how to support, free speech on our side. And but we'll take a few more callers while we get that set up on our Zoom side. Who's up next, Mo?
4849.
Okay, 4849.
4849.
You're on there with Destiny, Myron, and Andrew. What is your question, brother?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, welcome to the show.
All right, cool. So this whole debate was over a definition of was this event the thing of insurrection? So if you were to pick something like, we'll say there's a shape, and we were going to debate whether this shape was a square or not. Andrew's argument seems to be that, that maybe fits the definition of a rhombus or a parallelogram better, and that basically those definitions are mutually exclusive. I think that a lot of people would agree that the January 6th event does fall under the definition of a riot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it also wasn't an insurrection. So if you say, oh, hey, this shape, well, it has four sides, and each of the four sides is parallel, and say, that's a rhombus or that's a parallelogram, that's not actually a square, then like, okay, but you haven't said what a square is. And Destiny has put forth not just a personal definition, but the legal definition that's agreed onto by lots of courts, and that's how we do laws. We use courts' opinions to figure out whether this is a like falls under the court's, like the federal definition of what everybody agrees that is. And so the saying, oh, well, I don't have to define what a square is, it fits my definition of a rhombus fine, then
I see.
I don't see what we're arguing, because it seems like Andrew within that definition. So
You cut out,
he
caller.
agrees, but he doesn't like the name.
Bro, hang on. You cut out. Like me and Destiny both missed like maybe 15 seconds there.
Oh, sorry. Do you know where it was that it stopped? I'm just saying that the definition of riot and insurrection is not mutually exclusive. And so that just because he says that, oh, this fits my personal definition of a riot, does not necessarily mean that it's also not an insurrection. And the fact that they were trying to prevent some function of the government from happening, some law from being followed or carried out by the U.S. government, that's the defining factor. That's the thing that makes it an insurrection. And we can say that it was a riot, cool, but it was also an insurrection.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, would you say, and this is why I'm saying that you need to have some sort of way of saying this is not an insurrection, other than saying this is a riot.
Yeah, we've already been over this though multiple times. I know you don't understand the argument, but that doesn't mean it wasn't made.
Why it isn't?
Yeah, it's not. So I don't think you understand what the burden of proof is. Okay, I never have to tell you why the thing that
it's not an insurrection.
Why don't, dude? If you're just going to cut me off and not let me answer, then we're not going to have a productive combo.
Caller,
go ahead.
Let him make his point. Go ahead.
Who's the burden of proof on here?
It's on both of us.
No, it's not. Who's the burden of proof on?
Well, the burden of proof to say that it's not an insurrection is on the person who's claiming.
No, it's not my burden to say it's not. It's not my burden to say that it is.
You have no
the burden. The burden of proof is on the person who makes the claim, not for me to negate said claim, but for them to prove it. That's the distinction. Do you understand that?
You say you have no claim that it's not an insurrection.
You're not. Why? No. Answer my question. Do I need to negate a claim for you to be able to prove it? Can't you prove a claim?
Well, if you're
answer my question, dude.
It categorically does not fit the term.
Yeah, I know you're not answering the question, right?
Term insurrection.
All right. Whatever you say, bro.
I know you don't want to answer. It's fine. So.
All right. We'll go to next caller. And just
as a real quick thing. So like the prompt was January 6th an insurrection? Debating my definition of insurrection doesn't satisfy the prompt. It only satisfies attacking my position. But even if you did manage to completely defeat my position, not by actually showing, because you're not even really defeating my position, you're just making my position incoherent. But by doing so, you're also admitting that your position is incoherent as well, right? If you can prove that I don't have a good definition for insurrection, if you can prove that I don't have a good definition for insurrection, then you can prove that my position of saying it is an insurrection is incoherent. I would have to use some other word. So you haven't even given a position at all. So at best, you've only put us both at neutral, which is kind of meaningless.
Do you remember in the beginning of the debate where I gave you the criteria for the concessions that I would make if you were willing to concede on X, Y, Z point?
Yeah, but we're not here to just argue. Does Destiny have a satisfactory definition of insurrection?
Yeah, but if I can negate and we both, but if I have no negation, but we end up on neutral because your definition is incoherent, then do you remember when I said in my opening statement that the goal of that was to show that you no longer have the moral high ground because everything's a fucking insurrection at that point, and that means you're as much of an insurrectionist as the people you're accusing of being insurrectionists. That's
to be clear, that wouldn't make everything an insurrection. That would just make all riots an insurrection.
Yeah, I was being hyperbolic.
Okay, well, that's kind of hard when you're also being illogical. But the idea is
illogical.
That, all you're doing is reducing us both to the same position, which seems odd at the end of the day. But okay.
Why? Depends on what the goal of the debate is. In this particular
the goal was
case,
to show that both of us are neutral on whether January 6th was an insurrection. You know that you don't actually believe that. You believe it wasn't, right?
If you're neutral on whether or not January 6th is an insurrection, your claim is voided.
But then so would yours be, unless your claim is
What
you don't
claim
have a
am I
position.
making?
Well,
my claim is
if
only
you're,
that.
if you're a
My claim is
challenger,
only that
if you're
you
a
can't
challenger,
demonstrate it was.
if I say that January 6th was an insurrection, you wanted to challenge that position. Generally, the challenge would be that January 6th wasn't an insurrection.
Yeah,
not that January 6th,
like
not that January
generally-
6th doesn't comport with Destiny's definition of insurrection, or I think Destiny's definition of insurrection is incoherent. That's a different kind of debate.
Well, no, I don't think it's a different kind of debate. And saying loaded things like, well, generally this means doesn't mean anything. So ultimately, if I
Well,
can
generally,
reduce,
what thing
if
means
I can
what?
reduce this, if I can reduce this to a neutral position, then your claim that this was an insurrection is false.
Okay, but then your claim that it wasn't an insurrection is also false.
I never made such a claim.
What is your claim? Your claim is just that you're neutral. You have no position on it.
My claim was that I could be swayed either way. That
Well,
you
but that's
could
not what the
convince
debate.
me.
The debate wasn't
You
here
could
to
convince
sway you.
me.
Well, no, you can't be convinced because you can't even accept the definition of insurrection. So that's just not true.
I can be convinced, and you just saying you can't be convinced doesn't mean anything again.
So are you unconvinced by historical courts that have convicted people or used these definitions of insurrection in order to write legislation or in order to write constitutional amendments? What do you think the founding fathers meant? Not founding fathers, I guess. What do you think the framers of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment meant when they said insurrection? What do you think?
I think that they're tying it to rebellion.
Why would
Because
they?
every
But they very clearly.
Because every time I saw it, it seemed to coexist with rebellion. Every single time I see this, it seems like it's a lead towards rebellion.
If you agree that it meant rebellion, why would there be so many people that draw distinctions between insurrection and rebellion?
Yeah, until it comes to charging time. When it comes to charging time, it seems that if they can't draw it
Hold on.
towards
Why do you
rebellion-
keep just because you're talking about charges, criminal court and calling a
Well,
thing a
if
thing
you're
are
going to
two
appeal
different things?
if you're going to appeal to authorities here based around legal definitions, it's perfectly acceptable for me to appeal to the legal authorities, which are refusing to charge under this criteria, Destiny. They're refusing to charge under this criteria for insurrection. And it seems every definition that I can find for this is somehow vaguely associated with rebellion.
Yeah, it's associated with it because they believed every rebellion started with an insurrection, but that doesn't mean that every rebellion is an insurrection. That's why they use rebellion or insurrection, for instance, in Section 2 of the Second Confiscation Act. You can't give any historical things, though.
So I think if
right?
there was,
so,
if
for
there
instance,
was a
they say
big
in any
open-
rebellion or insurrection, inciting and setting foot on, assisting or engaging in any rebellion or insurrection, which is set under Section 2 of the Second Confiscation Act, they're not. They're two different things. That's why they use.
But the reason I think that the Supreme Court especially didn't want to hear this is because they would end up like you giving a definition which was so broad that it would encompass all sorts of things that we don't really perceive of as being insurrections, because we really associate insurrection and rebellion with the same kind of idea, which is exactly why I don't believe for a second, while you're over there saying your good faith, that you believe for a second that if a bunch of dope smoking hippies to, kind of resist federal law went and smoked a bunch of joints on federal property and a couple of them got rowdy, you would believe that that was an insurrection. I don't believe you. I simply
If a
don't
bunch of
believe you.
people smoking weed went and started setting fire to forests in the United States, America, on federal property because they were trying to get them to overturn.
No, a couple of them did. They started a small fire, let's say, right? Not a huge blazing forest fire. They just started a small fire. There was a little bit of rioting there, right? Somebody got beat up. A couple of them had maybe some melee weapons. I don't think we would associate that with rebellion, and so I don't think we would associate that with insurrection, which is what I think we associate with rebellion.
I'm sorry, because I don't know the logical structures of argumentation as well as you do. When you say people probably wouldn't do that, what kind of an argument are we making there? When you say that, like, people probably wouldn't think that's an insurrection, what kind of logical appeal are we making to challenge my definition? The people probably wouldn't think appeal?
Yeah, so
what is that? What structure are we
So
following?
hang on. So we'll again, we're going to untangle two different ideas. So I already gave you the critique of your definition. When you ask me Andrew, what do you associate with this thing, which is your direct question? What types of things do you associate with this? I tell you. Then I say, if that's the type of thing that I associate with it, I also think most people associate that type of thing with it as well. So these are two different
I don't care
ideas.
what most people, I'm looking at the legal and historical understanding of it, right? So in the Amy Warwick Prize case, the Supreme Court said insurrection against a government may or may not culminate in an organized rebellion, but a civil war always begins by insurrection against the lawful authority of the government. A rebellion
Civil
was
War
the...
did not begin.
The Civil War didn't begin with an insurrection?
No, a civil war did not begin because of J6.
That it says insurrection against a government may or may not
Yes.
culminate in an organized rebellion.
That's correct. So it could.
So there was an
still-
insurrection against the government. It didn't culminate in a rebellion, but those
Yes,
are two different
that's-
things.
yes,
and I can
this is-
show you Supreme Court cases where they said they're two
Sure.
different things. So your idea here of, well, they probably
Sure,
thought they were the
but
same
your
doesn't really
definition,
seem.
Unfortunately, it's too nebulous here for us to associate this specifically with only the idea of insurrection when there's other ideas that fit it better.
Is there a single historical scholar, Supreme Court case, writer or framer or lawmaker ever that you can cite to that says that there is a nebulous, there's no understanding of what insurrection is?
Well, actually, yes. So the Supreme Court justices themselves have stated this. I do have a quote from one of the Supreme Court justices who said, this is not an easy thing to tackle because the idea of it is contested and somewhat nebulous. I believe, in fact, that was Justice, now I'm paraphrasing, but I believe that was Justice Roberts who said that.
And what was the full quote here?
I would have to pull the quote up, so I'm paraphrasing, right? But it was something akin to, this idea is actually, it's a hard associative idea. This was from Roberts himself. The Supreme Court clearly did not want to weigh in on this because they were afraid of making a definition like your own, which would be so broad. Are you disputing this? Let's start with this. Are you disputing that you think the Supreme Court didn't weigh in on this because they were afraid that they could make a definition of this, which was so broad that things would fall under the category of insurrection that they really didn't want to fall under that category?
I don't think the Supreme Court made a strong statement about insurrection.
Yeah, what do you think, though? I'm asking you what you actually think.
They didn't really rule on the insurrection part.
I know they didn't rule on it, but why do you think they really didn't want to hear it? Why do you think it is that this is kind of such a hard concept for people to kind of get their minds around? It's because it is somewhat nebulous. It is associated with rebellion. And yes, there's precedents for these things, but the precedents don't directly apply to what J6 was.
It doesn't matter. The issue wasn't the issue.
Hang on, man. Let me finish my point, and then you can respond. Other things do seem to associate with it better. That's the point. Your definition is far too broad. You knew it would be far too broad. The Supreme Court also knows this. That's why the Supreme Court themselves, I think, really didn't want to go in and rule on it, because it would retroactively make a bunch of Democrats and Republicans insurrectionists based on other things that they have done.
That's great, and that's a bunch of reading into that Supreme Court decision that they had never said. But I'm pretty sure that the rationale that they gave and the issue was that different minds could disagree on whether or not an insurrection had taken place, and the idea that different states would make different decisions about it seemed to be very difficult for them. So in Barrett's...
So it's nebulous. It's a little bit nebulous. They can't really agree because it's kind of a nebulous concept, right?
Do you think that murder is a nebulous concept?
I think that justification for murder can be very nebulous.
Do you think that murder is a nebulous concept?
Stop.
Why are you rambling?
The question.
No, I asked you a question. Do you think murder is a nebulous concept?
I'm answering the question.
Do you think murder is a nebulous concept?
I'm trying to answer the question. Whenever you're ready to let me answer.
All right. I'm going to repeat it when you're done rambling. But
okay, well, I'm not going to ramble. I'm going to give you an actual direct answer. Certain aspects of murder, when it comes to justification, can be very nebulous. Yes. Like right to retreat laws can be very nebulous. Yes, that can constitute murder. It can be very nebulous. We have some concept of it, but it's not really something which is easily graspable. Yes, it can be very nebulous, Destiny, yes.
And yet we still have criminal convictions for murder.
That's true. We do still have criminal convictions for murder, which does not demonstrate your point at all.
It absolutely does. If a court is capable of determining whether or not a person can have a severe restriction to their life or liberty...
They determine?
They
determined that none of them committed insurrection. That's what they determined.
That's not what they determined. What they determined
yes, it is what they determined.
Really? Where in the Supreme Court
what did they
opinion
charge
does it say
him?
that?
Hang on. What did they charge him with?
No one is being charged. The Supreme Court is not a first review court.
I'm not talking about
the
Supreme Court.
I don't know what you're talking about then.
What I'm
no one
saying
is. I'm sorry. Where in the 14th Amendment does it say the crime of insurrection?
All you're doing is speed talking. What I'm saying to you is, when you ask me, are certain aspects of murder nebulous? Yes, of course, certain aspects of murder are nebulous. Can people still be charged on those aspects? Yes. Can they be prosecuted? Yes. But you say, well, then you can prove it. Great. I agree. You can prove it. And when these people were prosecuted, they were not prosecuted for insurrection. So clearly, they didn't think it was insurrection, or at least it seems like they didn't think it was insurrection, because they certainly didn't charge anybody with that.
Gotcha. Just as a quick spiel or whatever, because Andrew has no concept of how law or courts or anything works in the United States, the 14th Amendment has absolutely nothing to do with somebody being charged with a criminal conviction of insurrection. Criminal conviction of insurrection has nothing to do with any of this. And the question before the court in Trump v. Anderson wasn't whether or not somebody had engaged in the crime of insurrection. And the big issue that they cited to for why they rejected that case was because Section 5 of the 14th Amendment said that Congress can pass laws in order to implement something, and they interpreted it as meaning Section 3 could be implemented via the Section Section 5 power of the Congress, and that's why they threw that case out. They didn't
Total
make a
bait and
ruling.
switch.
It's not a bait and switch. It's just a basic
It is.
understanding of how
Here's
courts
why it's a
work.
bait-
But
Nope,
all I was
total bait and
saying was that you saying, well, it's nebulous, therefore a court can't decide that question. Courts deal with nebulous things literally all of the time.
That wasn't
the
my claim
idea that
either.
a court can't deal with something that's nebulous like insurrection
Wasn't
when
my
courts deal
claim.
with things like murder or affirmative defenses like self-defense or anything else is a ridiculous claim, and it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what courts are even supposed to do.
Yeah,
what courts
except
are
that
even
wasn't my
capable of doing.
claim. So here's the great kind of Destiny bait and switch, right? He just did a typical bait and switch. What he did was he said this. He said, Andrew, do you think that a court can do A, B, and C, or they can in some way rule or adjudicate even with a nebulous concept? My answer was yes. I think that even with a nebulous concept, they can. In this case, right? Even if we were to grant Destiny's argument that they can do this under nebulous concepts, they still didn't charge these people with insurrection, even if that's a nebulous concept. What he did instead was he did a bait and switch and said, "Oh, but he doesn't understand the law." Blah
Why
blah
do
blah
you
blah
keep
blah.
using
But
the
this
same
was a
argument that's been
lead-in.
shot down?
This was a lead-in question.
Does somebody need to be charged with insurrection for an insurrection
hang
to have
on,
had
bro.
occurred?
Let me finish my point. I just let you go through your whole
It's the same
diatribe.
gish gallop.
So I went. It's not a gish
It is a
gallop.
gish
It's a
gallop.
direct
You're repeating
response.
debunked
You don't
arguments.
even know what a gish gallop is. You're
I
just
do. It's
spurting
when you
over
lay
me.
a whole bunch of
So
bad claims
anyway,
on
I'm
over
not
and over
laying
and over
any
again with the
claims. I'm
idea that the
refuting the
opponent
claims you
can't
made.
actually refute them because you keep stacking the same
Bro,
bad claims over and over again.
you made the claim. I'm refuting it.
You're
So
not
this was
refuting
a
any claim. You're
basic.
refuting the
This was a
same debunked
this was a
arguments.
basic lead in, and I proved the basic lead in wrong. And so that's when he went off on the diatribe about, well, what the court, blah blah blah. What about the courts? What about the precedents? Well, that had nothing to do with the actual lead in question, which is what I was responding to. That's a classic bait and switch.
You said that the Supreme Court didn't rule on the definition because it was too nebulous. That's not
Because
true.
you
That's not
asked
why they
me,
rejected it.
you asked me, why do you think the Supreme Court acts? And so I just gave you my opinion. I think possibly it's because this is a nebulous concept. They didn't want to weigh in. It seems that Roberts agreed. When you read initially what Roberts said, it seems like that's what he's saying there, is that there's going to be a lot of disagreement here because we can't quite agree on this. That sounds nebulous to me.
All right. How about this? We'll take one more caller and then we'll go to the Castle Club guys. Let's get the guy on the line.
Yes.
Go ahead.
0789.
0789. Go ahead, hit the line. And then after him, I actually do have a potential topic of discussion for the panel. But let's get this caller on first. Go ahead.
0789, you are up. 0789, you are up.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. What's up, brother?
Awesome. Great. Mr. Wilson, big fan, Absolute Cinema. And I have a question for Mr. Borelli. If I knew what sexual assault was, but I had no fucking clue what rape was, could you ever prove to me that a rape took place? Because
because whatever definition you give, whatever definition I give for rape, you're just going to say it would fit with sexual assault. Yeah. No, true. Yeah. If you had no idea what rape was, but you knew well what sexual assault was, then any single time I try to define, well, I think a rape has occurred, you would just say, no, I think this fits with sexual assault. You would never give a definition of rape, and then you would just use that to try to win the argument. Yeah.
You left?
I think you left. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll go ahead and start switching on over to the Castle Club members. I'll hit a couple of these hands, and then I do have something that I was going to bring up to the panel. Who's the first person on, Bills? All right, we're going to go ahead. And just for the guys on Castle Club that are waiting, we're not going to put you on camera because we're live on YouTube and all the platforms, so I want to protect your guys' identities. But we'll go ahead and get the first person in that had something, Bills. Do we have them ready? Yeah, locals only. Yeah, Castle Club. Yeah, same thing. Yeah. Oh, no, not for the stream.
Damn.
That's
what I was just confirming, bro.
Yeah, no. I meant as in, like, it's fine. Go ahead. It's fine. We'll get these because they're still live on their platform, so it's cool.
Okay.
It's whatever.
Yeah,
Chief Rocker, go ahead, bro. Chief Rocker? Going once. Going twice.
You don't hear?
Yeah. Damn, guys, but I didn't want to get off YouTube. Fuck, guys. Come on, man. It's fine. Who's up next?
Hey, Myron, if you're gonna move this over to the Castle Club, let me kill the stream on this end, and then
keep it up. You keep it up. That wasn't our intention to kill our stream on our end.
Okay.
To do that, yeah, just an error. But you guys keep your stuff going on. That's cool. Just where the Castle Club members can ask questions. Go ahead.
Hey, so
Go ahead,
question for Destiny.
Go ahead.
Would you say that would you say this is an organized attempt by a group of people to defeat their government and take control of their country, usually by violence?
No, I don't think for insurrection. I think that maybe that gets you to rebellion, but for an insurrection, it doesn't have to be an attempt to control the entire government. It could just be to contravene a certain procedure, official proceeding, or to resist the implementation of a particular law, to resist like the execution of a law.
So not a violent attempt to take control of a government.
Violence or intimidation of violence is a necessary element, yes, but not to control the entire government.
Well, 3 out of 4 dictionaries define it as taking control of a government. And then there's a looser definition that is just an act of revolting against civil authority or established government. But that's just a loose definition.
That's fine, but we have a Supreme Court and we have a legislative history that I would refer to in this country before looking at how a dictionary would define a particular thing. I don't think that at any time when you engage in statutory construction or legal review of a particular thing, do you just open the dictionary and read the dictionary definition?
Yeah, but the definitions come from a general understanding. And since there was nothing legally pursued, then I don't think the legal definition applies here. And more it's just the definition of what we understand something to be. That's why I'm bringing this up.
Well, even if you wanted to appeal to a dictionary definition, you'd be appealing to dictionary definitions at the time that insurrection was enshrined in constitutional amendment. That's what you'd be looking for. And then number 2, there were things that were declared insurrections, and there were people that were forgiven of like crimes of insurrection. So there is a legislative and there is a judicial history of understanding what that is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So real quick, so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna end the stream on our end. You guys stay like you are. We're gonna continue running the show because you guys are live. We're gonna come back on YouTube because we did not mean to end our stream on YouTube and Rumble. So we're gonna restart it back up. Council Club members, you guys are still gonna go in and get your questions answered. We'll still be running everything. We're just gonna end the stream on our end, but we're still gonna be live on Zoom and everything else like that. So nothing really changes. We'll just fix some stuff on our back end. But let's get the next person on Council Club. And I apologize about that, guys. I did not mean to end our YouTube stream at all. Or our Rumble. That was a mistake that we made on our side. So, okay. Who's the next person on Council Club? Let's get them on. Or even we could go back to phone lines if we need to.
Yeah. Oh, no. We got Castle Club.
You got a Council Club guy? All right, let him ask this thing while we restart the stream. Who's up next?
Wait, here's
it's me, Rico.
Oh, okay.
Right, go ahead.
Destiny, real quick, I have a question for you. Do you support the imprisonment of Americans without a trial?
Depends on what you mean by imprisonment. Like police officers
Like,
are allowed to arrest you and hold you while you're pending a trial date. I think there's it's 60 or 90 days or something is your constitutional rights or whatever. I think that might vary from like state to state, but in general, no, I'm opposed to people being held without trial. But there's also like the Patriot Act stuff as well. So I mean, it would depend on the circumstance.
Okay. Tell them on Rumble.
All right, that's good enough.
Sure. In general, I don't think people should be held without trial. In general, I think that's probably not good. But I know there are specific circumstances where, like pretrial stuff, you can be held for a while you're awaiting formal charges. And then for the Patriot Act, if there are like matters of national security, they might be able to hold you without trial for some indefinite period. I'm not sure if that applies to citizens as well, but.
All right, who's up next? Okay, Eric Richardson, go ahead.
Hey, I got a question for Destiny. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
All right. So, Destiny, so if someone is protesting for or against a particular law that, would directly affect them, would you agree that a protest is a type of political fight?
Yeah. A type of political fight, I guess. That's a pretty...
Like they're fighting for their rights, right?
I guess, sure. Yeah, you can protest things, yeah.
Okay, so if a fight doesn't necessarily need to be violent, why then do you attribute Trump's words prior to January 6th as calling for violence when he didn't directly incite violence in his language?
I don't know if he directly incited violence. I think that's a fundamentally different question. I think that Donald Trump called people there on January 6th to protest the certification of the vote. Because he had led everybody to believe that certification could be stopped, either with Pence or with enough force applied, I guess. And as the insurrection was ongoing, Donald Trump was making calls to lawmakers to try to continue to encourage them to delay the certification of the vote. So it seems like there was a plan in mind the entire time. It was even more extensive than that, but yeah, he was hoping that there'd be a lot of pressure. That's why he called people there on January 6th. It's why he, even when he knew they had guns and stuff, he sent them to the Capitol to go and protest. It's why he said over and over again, stop the steal, fight like hell to take our country back. And it's why when violence started and he watched violence happening on TV and he heard that Ashley Babbitt had been shot, instead of like trying to call people off from being violent, he tried to take advantage of the violence in order to further his scheme of having the vote not certified. So all of that seems to point in a pretty obvious direction. Yeah.
Picking up to what Andrew had said, similar to that, you know, he didn't, like I said, he didn't incite them to violence, right? He was calling to fight, yes, fight for the election that he believes he was robbed from. That doesn't necessarily mean that he was wanting a violent outcome. And Andrew had pointed out that when the events did escalate to a violent nature, he did tweet to be peaceful. So to that point, Trump's motivation in the events of that day isn't in line with an insurrection. He wasn't trying to do an insurrection. He was just wanting a protest.
So
now,
here's like, yeah, so there's two different ways.
Into that is a different point.
Yeah, there's two different ways to look at this. I think this is a very simple analysis. I can't believe that there is, I don't think reasonable minds disagree here. But if we were to look at a man who wanted a peaceful protest, and you were to look at a man who didn't want a peaceful protest, who wanted an insurrection, Donald Trump takes every single action of the man who wanted an insurrection, but didn't obviously want to be like legally charged for it by saying, go and be violent, right? He called everybody there on a particular day. He was already enacting a plot, both in the background and publicly, to pressure Pence to toss out the vote. He was encouraging people to protest on the day, saying, stop the steal, leading people to believe over months that the election had been stolen. And when violence broke out on the Capitol grounds, even after Babbitt was killed, he was making phone calls to legislatures to have them stall the electoral vote. These are the actions of a man who wanted violence, saw violence happening, and everything was happening the way that he wanted, except he didn't ultimately completely stall the vote. If Donald Trump didn't want violence, he either one, probably wouldn't have called them there on the 6th. That's obviously going to be a huge red flag. Two, as soon as it got violent, he would have made calls to the National Guard to figure out like, hey, what's going on? Can I get people down there? Three, when multiple people were going into his office to ask him, hey, can you please tweet to get these people to fuck off, to stop? He would have done it immediately instead of waiting until after Ashley Babbitt was dead, instead of waiting for hours of violence to rage on. And four, he would have said right at the very beginning, at the very second anybody complained about anything, he would have reminded people to like, hey, like either leave, don't go in, don't do this particular thing, stop this now or go home, instead of, again, waiting and capitalizing on the violence by making phone calls to people. Remember, when McCarthy called him, Donald Trump literally said, sounds like these people are a hell of a lot more mad than you are about this. Like, this is a man who is taking advantage of the violence every step of the way. You can't possibly look at this guy and think, man, he really wanted them to be peaceful, when he's taking advantage of the violence the whole time and doing nothing to stop it, when it's easily within his power to do so.
So since you say then that, you know, he essentially all but called for the insurrection by you know, choosing his words carefully, or, you know, however you want to say it, that my counter question to that would be, how could someone in his position want to peacefully protest the results of the election without you then saying it was an insurrection, being that it was the people at the site who ended up being violent, not because he called for it, it just turned into that. So how could Trump have otherwise called for a peaceful protest without you saying it was an insurrection?
Well, one is sending them to the place where the vote was being certified is already a huge red flag, number one. Number two is you've spent really months getting all these people to believe that the election was stolen with no evidence. Number three is you've used multiple parts of your government to engage in lies over and over again about there being evidence of voter fraud, which there wasn't, and he knowingly lied about all of these things. And four, there's probably never an appropriate way to protest the certification of the vote. Because at that point, you're not protesting like voter fraud. You're not protesting like a court's decision. You're literally protesting the certification of the election. The electors already voted on the 14th of December. The election itself was already held on the 3rd of November. Like at that point, what are you protesting? You're just protesting the certification of the vote, the peaceful transfer of power.
Okay.
Love you.
All right, who's up next? And then I'll go to my topic that I was going to ask you guys because I just want to get shift the conversation a little bit, make it more a little interesting.
James McFarland.
James McFarland, go ahead. And we're back.
Myron, I do have tonight. I do have a hard out at 11.
Oh shit! Eastern Standard Time or?
Yep, Eastern Time. Yep.
Oh shit! So you got 10 minutes left.
Yep.
Okay, no worries, man. That's fine. We'll just finish answering these questions and then we'll try to speed through as many of them as we can.
Y'all call me while I'm taking a dump, but fuck it. Alright, so just to give, I'm gonna do a little statement and a question. But my statement is, I got to admit, I personally I fuck with both Destiny and Andrew as far as both ends of the aisle reign, like debating wise in the YouTube sphere. I typically think Destiny has more intellectual valid points, but throughout this little conversation y'all had, I think Andrew bodied you, and that's because of that hippie statement, bro. If people are out all protesting, they're filling every 4 of your things.
Worst dinner for your waistline. Sweet potato.
Oh, sorry about that.
What?
Continue on.
Yeah. I don't know. As far as those 4 points are, if they're all protesting for weed, you're considering that an insurrection. It's like, if that's your definition, then that an insurrection, all right, who gives a fuck about who's having an insurrection? Like, that shit is not as serious as you're trying to make it, if it's as simple as something like that. Like,
I mean, you might just, maybe you don't think an insurrection is a big deal. That's fine. But people probably shouldn't be gathering to violently try to overturn laws in this country. We've got a process for it. We've got a whole legislative.
I knew that was going to be your rebuttal. But so why are you trying to equate that with a group of people smoking weed against a weed law? Like, that means words the same. Don't make both of those insurrections.
I never made both of them the same, but an insurrection is an insurrection. I can show you examples of rape that are far more atrocious than other examples of rape. That doesn't make one not rape.
Okay,
like, any crime can be done with more severity than another crime. That doesn't make it not a crime. It doesn't make it not a thing.
And a bunch of people smoking weed against a weed law doesn't make them trying to overthrow the government.
I agree. I don't think it does. A bunch of people. But if a bunch of people, would you agree that if a bunch of people smoked weed and they all decided they were going to show up and break into Congress to try to prevent them from passing some new law?
That wasn't the argument you made, though. The argument he made was a bunch of hippies did all 4 of those arguments you made, and the one thing against the law that they were suppressing, because I was going to say this too, Andrew's argument against the suppression versus doing illegal activities during a riot, that was his stupid fault for his argument as well.
Wait, hold on. To be clear, Andrew didn't say they were just smoking. Andrew said they were setting forests on fire.
No. I'm not talking about that in general. I'm talking about Andrew was talking about they're committing crimes during their riot or whatever, and you were saying that's not them going against a law. Like, I'm agreeing with both of you in both what you're saying, but in his specific argument when he said those people are trying to smoke weed, I'm a little drunk right now too, so my words isn't as coherent. But when he's saying they were going against smoking weed and there's a bunch of hippies getting together and smoking weed, you can't equate that to people overthrowing a government and say, yeah, that's insurrection if that's going with my definition.
Yeah, smoking weed wouldn't be an insurrection. A crowd of people smoking weed wouldn't be an insurrection.
And even if it covers all 4 of your bases that you were saying,
one of them is by force or intimidation in order to overturn a law. So they would have to be rioting. They would have to be causing violence in order to get people to overturn a law.
So if they were doing that while smoking weed and their reason was smoking weed, that's an insurrection.
If a bunch of people showed up at Capitol Hill and they said that we're going to engage in violent conduct because we disagree.
Capitol Hill. Why does that have to be Capitol Hill?
I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I'm just giving an example.
Yeah,
I'm saying if they showed up,
it could be anywhere. And I'm more of your fan.
I guess it could be anywhere. If they engaged somewhere and they wanted to go and do a whole, maybe it could be a state. I don't know, maybe it could be a fucking neighborhood of anti-pot smokers or whatever. And they're like, we're going to go here and we're going to start rioting and burning houses down because we want to have the fucking weed laws changed. It is bullshit that these motherfuckers took weed from us and they engaged in that behavior. I'd say, yeah, that's an insurrection. You've got an assembly of people that are trying to use violence and then you're trying to change the laws, that are affecting publicly everybody. Yeah, that's an insurrection. You're insurrecting the government. That's not the process by which we change laws.
So would you agree that insurrection is not that serious in that case then?
No, I think insurrection is incredibly serious. You don't want people thinking that they can get laws changed in the country by doing violent riots. That's horrible.
So you don't think the definition of that should be changed, or the word should be changed for an overthrowing of the government based off of your definition?
What
your
you did?
definition
I understand
crosses
maybe
many boundaries.
Yeah, no. No, if you've got a bunch of people, even if they smoke weed, if they're committing acts of violence as a big group in order to pressure people to change laws, no, I don't think that's like a not serious thing. I think it's a really serious thing.
You think a bunch of people gathering together, smoking weed, if police come to try to control that situation, they start protesting against it as a part of groupthink. Like, this is common psychology. Like, it takes one person to go against police for a bunch of people to do that. You think those people are equivalent to people trying to overthrow a government?
No, I don't think so. No, but I don't know if that would even count as an insurrection by that. If it's just a bunch of people that got together and they're smoking weed or whatever and it ends up bringing a riot, no, I don't think that would necessarily be an insurrection.
But they got together against that law against weed. They've gotten violent or threatening, the way you said. Like, it's crossing every four.
Listen, okay, hold on. You know what? This is the argument I would make also. And if any other caller wants to say this, I'm gonna flip this on them. If somebody wants to give a different positive definition, then fine, go for it. But like, I'm not gonna sit here and play through every single of like the most absurd hypotheticals you can give me. If you want to argue against me, you're arguing against the historical and judicial record in the United States. If you want to give another definition of insurrection, that's fine. But it can't just be, what if two people go into the forest and they say F the government and they kick a federally owned tree as hard as possible in order to like, it's, yeah, I mean, like we can probably find definitions around the edges that are like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess technically this would be an insurrection, maybe it wouldn't qualify, but I'm not gonna, yeah, if you want to give an alternate positive definition for it, then we can critique that one. But I mean, this is the one that exists in the historical record. Like, that's, yeah.
My main point was you could technically say a bunch of things was an insurrection. So let's not, like, if that's the case, then an insurrection, the word insurrection is not that serious. But
it's very serious just because there's a name for this. I don't know if it's the continuum fallacy or what, but just because you can't like concretely define it, every single edge of a particular thing, doesn't mean that you can say, well, that thing doesn't exist or it's not very serious. That's just not true. We can imagine a ton of crimes that are very serious and not serious that are the same crime.
You could say one thing's more serious than another being the same thing. But
yeah, so I could say there are some insurrections that are probably really bad, and historically in the United States, there are some insurrections that probably weren't that bad, right? Like that, I think that whiskey rebellion was over like fucking tax stamps. I think the biggest deal was that it was a big one, and it had to do with like the first time the national like army had been mobilized for anything. But like that, it probably wasn't that big of a deal. Every insurrection isn't the worst type of insurrection. I think this particular insurrection was really bad, but we can't even agree on what the definition of insurrection is. And the reason why is because Andrew knows if he gives any definition of an insurrection, it's either going to exclude everything from being an insurrection, or it'll easily include January 6th.
What up?
All right. Was there somebody else next?
This is yeah, I got
you got to go. Right?
Yeah, I do have to go. But I did want to thank Destiny for having this debate with me. It was a lot of fun. And thank you again to Fresh and Fit for hosting. My name is Andrew Wilson. I'm the host of The Crucibles, fastest growing debate channel on YouTube. You can find our back catalog at thecrucible.video. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. Sorry, I only had 3 hours allocated to this. We kind of went a little over, but.
And if your people want to continue to watch the stream, they could come on over to either Fresh and Fit or...
Are you on YouTube right now?
Yeah, we're live back on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll set up a raid so that they can come on over, okay? If you're going to do an after show or something.